In a grand office within the capital of the human kingdom, the middle-aged king delivered shocking news to his daughter, Lilith, and the man accompanying her. The king revealed that the Witch of the Giant Tower had just annihilated 2,000 Beastman troops. The news left both Lilith and the man in utter shock. The king explained that as a result of the incident, the demon state has begun to view the Witch of the Giant Tower as a major threat. They have even called for a meeting between all races to discuss the next steps. The king mentioned that the exact timing has not been set, but Lilith and the man must be ready at any moment. Lilith and her companion nervously acknowledged the king's command. Lilith responded to the news with great enthusiasm. In her view, if the reports were true, the power of the Witch of the Giant Tower was not mere gossip, it was concrete proof. Lilith argued that they should seize this opportunity to get closer and secure the witch's help to elevate the human kingdom's standing and escape their status as a nation subservient to other races. The king immediately asserted his stance with a harsh tone. He stated that dealing with the witch was far too dangerous. Lilith remained persistent, explaining that the witch actually fought for human freedom and protected them. Lilith noted that during her visit to the tower, she saw firsthand that life there was incredibly prosperous. Growing increasingly irritated, the king challenged Lilith with a rhetorical question. He asked if she truly understood how dangerous the Witch of the Giant Tower was. Confused, Lilith admitted she did not and asked for an explanation. The king finally revealed a dark fact. The witch had overthrown the Dark Elf Queen and conquered the entire Dark Elf archipelago. The king added that this meant the balance of international power had shifted drastically. Especially after the Beastmen's defeat, the positions of several kingdoms had become unbalanced. The king also mentioned that the Beastmen had previously kidnapped humans to be used as hostages, an act that incited the great wrath of the Witch of the Giant Tower. Therefore, the human kingdom needed to condemn the Beastmen's heinous actions. Despite this, the king could not hide his shock that 2,000 famously strong Beastmen could be wiped out instantly. Lilith responded firmly, blaming the Beastmen because they were the ones who started the war. According to Lilith, they deserved the consequences after daring to challenge the witch and treating humans with cruelty. The king briefly agreed with Lilith's argument, but then issued a greater warning. If the witch could suppress the Beastmen that easily, it meant nothing could stop her. The king emphasized that the human kingdom was far weaker than the Dragonute Empire and the demon state. If the witch ever grew angry with humanity, the result would be a catastrophe. Lilith tried to defend her position, saying that the Witch of the Giant Tower, Light, possessed high ideals regarding human freedom and treated everyone fairly. However, Lilith realized that if any human acted recklessly and offended Light, they would certainly not be forgiven. This realization allowed Lilith to begin understanding her father's concerns. The king then explained that the human kingdom's position among the 8 other races was already precarious. He reminded her that one small mistake could trigger the wrath of other parties. But most dangerously, if they incurred the wrath of the Witch of the Giant Tower, humanity might truly face extinction. As king, he could not take such a massive risk for the sake of ambition. Lilith fell silent upon hearing the decision. The man beside her, looking disappointed, muttered that the king had become too rigid and incapable of change, not even caring what happened to humanity as long as his position remained secure. The king finally ended the discussion coldly, dismissing Lilith and the man. After leaving the room, Lilith met her maid, Nono, and thanked her. Nono commented that the discussion had not gone well. Lilith then mentioned that the meeting of the 9 principalities would take place soon and asked Nono to prepare their belongings. Nono seemed surprised, as she thought the meeting was still far off. Lilith could only reflect, realizing many things had changed. Nono expressed her opinion that the king would never want to cooperate with the witch. Lilith replied disappointedly that as long as the king remained in power, the human kingdom would remain a weak nation, constantly exploited and victimized. Lilith reaffirmed her determination to change that fate. She was certain that only by joining Light and his followers could humans stand equal to other races. Holding a rose, Lilith revealed that the investigation into the spies was still ongoing, but their time was running out because the meeting would be held sooner than expected. Finally, Lilith made a major decision. She was determined to ask for Light's help once more, even if it meant overthrowing her own father for the future of humanity. In her view, only with Light's power could she protect the people and free them from their status as slaves. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Light was talking with Mei, Eli, and Aoyui. In the middle of their conversation, Light suddenly stopped because Lilith contacted him via telepathy. Light informed his subordinates that due to the victory over the Beastmen, the grand meeting would be held much earlier than originally scheduled. His followers acknowledged that the impact of their war was indeed immense. Lilith, hearing the news via telepathy, was also shocked. Lilith remarked that the Beastmen's defeat was a fitting punishment for their kidnapping of humans, and everything that had happened felt like natural justice balancing the world. Lilith then asserted her intentions to Light. During the upcoming meeting, she intended to overthrow her father and become the queen of the human kingdom. To achieve this, Lilith hoped Light could help build a secret alliance with the elf, dark elf, dwarf, and beastman kingdoms to ensure her success. Light explained that the system for choosing human leaders was determined by the other 8 races, not by humans themselves. Although they could use military force or secret strategies, the problem ran deeper than that. Lilith admitted this and said she knew her actions were risky, but there was no time left. Lilith explained that the king would never implement reforms, nor would her brother, who lacked the courage to take action. Lilith realized that only she could protect the future of humanity. Although aware her actions were rushed, Lilith politely presented 3 requests to Light before the meeting began. With full determination, Lilith stated her first request. She wanted Light to help her increase her power level so she could stand equal to the rulers of other races, while simultaneously preparing herself to seize the throne and change the fate of all mankind. Light listened to Lilith as she explained her desire to level up. Lilith clarified that it was impossible to eliminate all spies in the human kingdom in a short time, so she wanted to strengthen herself first to avoid being easily assassinated. After that, she intended to advance reforms and purge the traitors in her kingdom. Lilith continued her first request by asking for magic items that could prevent poisoning and stealthy assassinations. In her opinion, even a high level did not necessarily guarantee protection against such attacks. Light understood, as he also required protection from instant kill attacks. Then, Lilith made her final request, asking Light to attend the meeting of the 9 nations as her bodyguard. Light was momentarily surprised, but Lilith explained that she would feel safer with him by her side, especially since the leaders of the Demon State and the Dragonu Empire would be present. Light thought this was a great opportunity to see those great leaders in person and observe their strength directly without having to sneak around. Lilith added that a royal bodyguard must be a high-ranking adventurer, regardless of race. Therefore, she wanted Light to disguise himself as an adventurer to attend the meeting. Light realized that to do so, he would need at least an A rank. He reflected on whether he could achieve this, as he had only been laying groundwork in various countries until now. A panel explained the adventurer ranking system, ranging from F rank for beginners to A rank as the peak, with S rank being a rare exception. Lilith emphasized that no matter how strong Light was, there were limits that could not be bypassed without such formalities. Light agreed. Without officially participating in adventurer activities, reaching A rank would indeed be impossible. Ultimately, Light decided to accept everything. He agreed to be Lilith's bodyguard and fulfill her other 2 requests. Lilith appeared overjoyed and offered her sincere thanks. Light simply smiled, saying that he was the one who was grateful for the valuable opportunity to see the world's leaders firsthand. Their meeting ended on a calm note, but Light realized that some in the Abyss were unhappy with the decision. Shortly after, Aoyuki expressed her frustration, saying that Lilith did not appreciate Light and should pay for her insolence with her life. Eli briefly agreed, but then corrected her words. Eli explained that while Lilith had indeed received a great reward for saving Yume, Light's younger sister, she was annoyed that Lilith treated Light as if he were merely a tool to grant her wishes. Light calmed them both down, saying that while Lilith asked for a lot, all her requests were reasonable and not in vain. Light added that he respected Lilith's determination to save humanity with her own hands. Lilith's status as the first princess could also provide a significant advantage for their future plans. In Light's view, Lilith's intentions were truly sincere, as she was willing to abandon her status for the sake of her people. Light admitted that he still respected Lilith, especially because she had once saved Yume. So, even though Aoyuki and Eli felt they had repaid her enough, Light still felt indebted. To him, Lilith's requests were within acceptable limits. However, Light also understood his subordinates' concerns and promised to keep a close watch on her. Light asserted that if Lilith were to become arrogant or make excessive demands in the future, he would handle her himself. Aoyuki eventually bowed and accepted Light's decision, as did Eli. However, Eli warned that if Lilith ever overstepped her bounds, she would be the one to step in and resolve the matter. Afterward, Aoyuki and Eli took their leave. Light realized that the loyalty of his two followers was so immense that it had manifested as resentment toward Lilith. This left Light slightly concerned. Even though he could calm them for now, the underlying dissatisfaction was still palpable. Light knew he would also have to sue the other members to prevent any future conflicts with Lilith. That night, in Eli's private chambers, Eli remarked that Light was indeed an exceptionally kind person. Aoyuki agreed, describing Light's kindness as something divine. However, Eli began to feel irritated, arguing that Lilith had gone too far by treating Light as if he were a subordinate. Aoyuki mentioned she would forgive Lilith this time only because Light had already shown her mercy. Nevertheless, Aoyuki emphasized that if Lilith dared to toy with Light again, she would finish her off personally. Eli tried to de-escalate the situation, noting that Light would not want that to happen. But she added that if Light were to give permission later, Lilith's sin of trying to exploit him was grave enough to warrant a death sentence, though Eli was willing to send her to heaven with due respect. Following that, their conversation shifted. They began to gossip lightly about how deeply Lilith had fallen in love with Light. However, the narrative explained that, unknowingly, Lilith had already sowed seeds of dislike in the hearts of several Abyss members due to her proximity to Light. A few days later, Lilith arrived to increase her level. She was astonished to see a room filled with high-grade weapons, armor, and magic items. Light told her she could take whatever she liked. Lilith was shocked to find items equivalent to Phantasm-class gear, which are usually considered national treasures in any country. Lilith could hardly believe Light was giving them all to her, but Light casually replied that they were merely spare equipment. Light explained that Lilith must learn to ensure her own safety because they could not protect her at all times. Hearing this, Lilith was deeply moved and bowed in sincere gratitude. After donning her new armor, Lilith stood in the forest with Light and several of his followers. Light announced that they would begin the level up session. With full enthusiasm, Lilith replied that she was ready and asked for Light's guidance to start the training. Light arrived with his followers and informed Lilith that before the hunt began, he would introduce two individuals who would assist her in leveling up. Light explained that these two had recently been summoned from cards, Orca and Chaos, both of whom served directly under Eli, the Witch of the Giant Tower. Light emphasized that they would help Lilith level up and suggested it would be best if she got along with them. Orca introduced himself politely with a friendly smile, identifying himself as musician of illusions, level 8,888. Meanwhile, Chaos, who appeared somewhat tense, only let out a soft sound. Light then introduced Chaos as child of Chaos, also level 8,888. Lilith responded politely, introducing herself as the first princess of the human kingdom and thanking them for their assistance. Orca casually remarked that since this was a direct request from Light, it was no trouble at all. Orca glanced at Chaos while explaining to Lilith that although Chaos might seem strange, he harbored no ill intent. Once the introductions were complete, Light decided they were ready to begin hunting monsters around the giant tower. Light explained that their targets were monsters around level 300. Lilith was momentarily startled by this, but Light provided an explanation. Lilith was currently only level 7. If she were to face a powerful monster like Eli's Koshmar summons, the result could be fatal. Light shared that he had previously leveled up with Mei's help, but those monsters were now under their control and could no longer be sacrificed. Therefore, Light decided to help Lilith level up gradually. According to Light, the forest around the giant tower was not the most efficient place for leveling, but it was the safest for Lilith. Light mentioned that if Lilith could reach a level in the hundreds, it would be enough to protect herself from assassins once she took the throne. Light then laid out the strategy. Orca would lure the monsters, Chaos would bind them, and Lilith would strike with her weapon. Light told Lilith she didn't need to kill the monsters outright. She only needed to land a hit and wound them. Light also reassured Lilith that they would protect her, so she had no reason to fear even if the plan went awry. Orca began his move, signaling he was ready. Using his special ability, Flute Blast, he summoned a monster. Before long, a massive creature appeared, a level 300 double-mouthed lizard with 2 ferocious mouths, one on its head and one on its stomach. Lilith looked visibly shocked by its appearance. Chaos immediately lunged forward and unleashed his Chaos Scythe move, attacking the monster, followed by a shadow dance technique that created a vortex of dark energy. Seeing the opportunity, Light urged Lilith to attack. Lilith's rapier possessed the wind attribute, so she did not need to touch the monster directly. She only needed to focus and release wind blades from a distance. Lilith was nervous, but tried anyway. Inwardly, Light realized that Lilith, who had never killed a living being before, now had to do so for the future of humanity. With a mix of fear and courage, Lilith launched a wind attack that landed directly on the monster's body, which was already bound by Chaos. The attack was enough to mortally wound the lizard monster until it finally died. Lilith stood silent and trembling, her face pale, clearly unaccustomed to the scent of blood and the reality of what she had just done. Light, concerned, asked if she was all right, but Lilith simply took a deep breath and forced a smile, saying she was fine and asking to continue the hunt. Orca and Chaos exchanged glances. Orca asked why Lilith was pushing herself so hard. He even suggested that Lilith use a double instead, as she possessed the Shadow Double ability. According to Orca, Lilith could stay in a safe place like the giant tower without having to fight monsters directly. But Lilith refused. She believed that if everything were left to a fake, the struggle would be meaningless. To sit on the throne with dignity, she had to truly fight for herself. Lilith was convinced that no one would follow a leader who had never experienced the blood, sweat, and tears of struggle. Light was deeply impressed. For a princess, Lilith possessed extraordinary courage and resolve. Light realized that Lilith truly intended to save humanity's future with her own hands. Orca's view shifted as well. He admitted he once thought humans were beyond saving, but realized there was still someone worth helping. Chaos, hearing this, only responded innocently and somewhat awkwardly. Finally, Light said they would continue the hunt at Lilith's pace to ensure everything remained safe. Lilith thanked him, feeling that Light was truly considerate. Light then signaled Orca to lure the next monster, and Orca immediately obeyed. The story then shifted to another narrative regarding the slaves taking refuge in the giant tower. Among them was a girl who appeared overjoyed, expressing her gratitude for being saved and introducing herself as Miki. The giant tower presented a magnificent sight with a small village surrounding it. In one of the shops, Silica was cleaning and looked satisfied once everything was tidy. Standing in the middle of the shop, Silica gazed around, feeling proud that she finally had a place that was once her parents' dream. In her thoughts, Silica remembered her childhood, helping her parents sell goods as street vendors. She had once promised to open her own shop so her parents could stop traveling, but those memories turned bitter when her parents were killed by monsters, leaving Silica as the sole survivor. Silica lived alone and was eventually sold into slavery. She endured many horrific experiences until she nearly gave up. However, her fate changed when she was rescued by someone who looked terrifying but turned out to be kind. She thought she would be sold again, but instead, she was freed by the witch of the giant tower and given a place to live within the tower's domain. Thanks to her experience as a small-time trader, Silica could read, write, and calculate. Because of these skills, the witch of the giant tower entrusted her with managing a shop. Silica was grateful, realizing that life is truly unpredictable. While lost in thought, she remembered that the new assistant she had been waiting for would arrive today. Silica was happy because she would finally no longer be working alone. She imagined how nice it would be to have a partner to help guard the shop, manage stock, serve customers, and write reports. Everything would become much easier. Furthermore, the assistant was said to be literate and skilled in arithmetic as well. The narrative continued regarding the major changes at the Giant Tower. After the Witch of the Giant Tower conquered the Elf Queen and liberated humanity, many former slaves came to settle there. Their numbers had grown to over 10,000 due to the massive liberation efforts. Now, around the tower, many new houses, fields, wells, and shops had been built bit by bit. Fairy and dragon servants helped with the labor, but human manpower was still lacking, especially in agriculture and specialized skills. Light's gift, unlimited gacha, could actually provide everything, but Light wanted humans to be self-sufficient. Consequently, the humans began building their own homes, tilling fields, and crafting daily necessities. Several people with trading experience also started businesses, including Silica, who was entrusted with managing this shop. Initially, Silica struggled because she managed the shop alone, but eventually, she found the perfect person to help. The girl's name was Miki. When Miki arrived, shouting from the front of the shop, Silica was startled but delighted that the person she had been waiting for had finally appeared. The narrative revealed that Miki was also a former slave, now free thanks to the Giant Tower. However, behind that facade, her true identity was not that of an ordinary human. She was actually a master from the demon state who had infiltrated the tower. Miki introduced herself cheerfully, saying she was happy to work in Silica's shop. Meanwhile, Silica welcomed her warmly, thanking Miki for coming. Miki also seemed enthusiastic about working alongside a girl as cute as Silica. Silica then invited Miki to rest for a moment since the shop was closed for the day. She said that later that afternoon, she would take Miki on a tour around the Giant Tower. Miki appeared very excited, as it was her first time seeing such an incredible place. Silica also promised to show her the cool shops there. But before that, there was something important she wanted to convey. Silica suddenly became serious. She stated that there were things one must never do at the Giant Tower. Miki felt a brief moment of fear because Silica's tone sounded quite stern. Silica apologized and explained that this was for Miki's own good as well. Silica began by sharing the first rule. Criminal acts are strictly forbidden, including speaking ill of the Giant Tower or the fairy servants. If one persists, people will grow angry and distant, and one might even be ostracized from society. Silica also warned against approaching the fairy servants with strange intentions, let alone hurting them. She told a story about a male slave who once attacked a fairy servant after sunset. Miki was immediately terrified and asked what happened to the fairy servant. Silica said the fairy servant was fine because they are strong. However, the man who attacked her was gone. The fairy servant simply remarked that someone so brazen was no longer worthy of living in this place, and since then, it was as if he truly never existed. Silica continued the story, saying the man was considered a traitor for attacking those who had saved them. Ultimately, he was cast back into the old world that had once enslaved him. Since that day, not a single person at the tower dared to mention his name. Miki could only swallow hard, while Silica emphasized that everyone here respects the Witch of the Giant Tower and the fairy servants. No one dares to oppose them. After that, the atmosphere grew calm again, and Silica invited Miki to have breakfast before their walk later that afternoon. Miki offered her thanks, thinking to herself that her infiltration mission had succeeded, though the place felt strange. Despite this, Miki kept smiling while observing Silica, finding the girl incredibly cute. But behind her sweet smile, Miki's thoughts began to turn dark. She briefly touched her own body while musing about the place. Then, Miki called out to Silica in a cheerful tone. Yet behind that happy expression, her eyes glared with sharp, malicious intent, whispering to herself that something cute was waiting for her, and the thought made Miki even more excited. Silica took Miki for a walk around the giant tower city. Along the way, Silica pointed out her favorite eatery and mentioned that the place always served large portions and tasted delicious. Then, Silica also showed her a clothing store that reportedly had many cute outfits currently trending among the girls. Miki looked around and felt that the number of shops in the city was still small compared to the large population living there. Silica agreed, but argued that the giant tower was still impressive because of its great facilities, pointing toward a large building, the school she was referring to. Silica explained that the teachers were fairy servants who taught the children everything from language to sports. Miki remarked that she was too old for school, and since she was already literate, she was assigned to help manage the shop. Silica was happy to hear that and said she was glad to be working with Miki. This comment made Miki bashful. Her face turned red, and she hurriedly searched for another topic to hide her embarrassment. Miki then pointed toward a group of people gathering to listen to a speech from a girl dressed like a priestess. The girl urged the people to give thanks to the Witch of the Giant Tower, the fairy servants, and Saint Mia, while inviting them to join the Giant Tower Worshippers group. Miki concluded that the Giant Tower Worshippers were a kind of religion that worshipped the witch, the fairy servants, and Saint Mia. However, Miki was curious about who Saint Mia actually was. Silica explained that Mia was the witch who had assisted in the rescue of the human hostages. Silica also mentioned that while the Witch of the Giant Tower and the fairy servants were respected, it was thanks to Mia that many humans were saved, which is why Mia was considered holy. Many of those saved by Mia eventually joined the Giant Tower worshippers, but those who had lived there a long time, like Silica herself, had not joined yet due to a lack of understanding. Miki found it a bit strange, as she felt it was excessive for an ordinary human to be elevated to the same status as the Witch of the Giant Tower or the fairy servants. Silica then shared that someone had once protested the fairy servants to have such invitations regulated, but the request was denied because they did not forbid the existence of the Giant Tower worshippers. Miki thought to herself that the fairy servants neither supported nor forbade it. Consequently, people were still confused about whether to join and preferred to keep their distance for now. At that moment, Miki observed the increasingly bustling cityscape and remarked that the city was truly extraordinary. Silica suggested they move to the outskirts of the city because it was quieter for talking. There, Miki was shocked to see large-scale construction, with many people and dragons working together. Silica smiled proudly and said that those dragons also served to drive away monsters coming from the forest. Silica reminded Miki not to get too close to the dragons because they were still dangerous. However, if she ever got lost, Miki could ask the fairy servants or the dragons for help, as they understood human speech and would not attack unprovoked. Miki nodded in understanding and continued asking about the vastness of the tower. Silica explained that the fairy servants were around level 500, and there were even dragons with levels exceeding 1,000. Inwardly, Miki was incredulous, yet filled with awe. On the other hand, Miki, who was actually a master from the demon state, began to have twisted thoughts while glancing at the fairy servants. Miki imagined filthy things about them and felt tempted. In her mind, Miki was curious about the bodies of the fairy servants and the sounds they would make if they were tortured. These thoughts grew wilder and aroused her until she finally had to force herself to remain calm. Miki was startled when two fairy servants carrying baby dragons passed in front of them. Miki immediately put on a normal face to avoid appearing suspicious. As evening approached, Silica suggested they head home, and Miki agreed, enthusiastically offering to help with the cooking later. On the way back, Miki thought she saw something in the distance, but wasn't sure if it was real or just a shadow. A dragon growled softly while the fairy servant beside it simply stared in silence, as if knowing something. After arriving home, Silica cooked dinner and invited Miki to eat with her. Miki was happy because the food was delicious, despite being slightly burnt. They laughed together, enjoying the comfortable atmosphere. Afterward, they retired to their respective rooms to rest, wishing each other good night. Silica lay down with a smile, certain that Miki was a good girl. But in the other room, Miki lay down with a cold gaze directed toward the giant tower under the moonlight, as if harboring a hidden plan. A few moments later, Silica, who was already asleep, heard a voice softly calling her name. In a half-conscious state, Silica woke up and sat on the edge of the bed as commanded by the voice. Standing before her was Miki in her true form as a master, wearing revealing clothing with a wicked smile, calling Silica a clever girl. Miki, in her master form, stood in Silica's room along with her summoned monster. Seeing Silica sitting obediently on the corner of the bed, as ordered, Miki smiled with satisfaction, muttering that Silica was obeying perfectly. Her gaze was cold yet filled with a sense of triumph. The next panel explained Miki's identity as a summoner with a gift called Vespid Summoner, which was limited to the Vespid race. Her level reached 6,000, and Miki was known as a specialist in summoning, capable of strengthening and manipulating the abilities of her summoned Vespids at will. The abilities of Miki's summoned monster were also described. The pheromone queen bee possessed the power to hypnotize targets to extract information, but this effect was only potent on weak beings in enclosed spaces. Her pheromones were only strong enough to repel other low-level bee-race monsters, not to fully control humans. However, with her gift, Miki could enhance the pheromone queen bee's effect until it was strong enough to subdue Silica. With a sweet smile, Miki explained to the hypnotized Silica that such influence was entirely possible. Silica, in her vacant state, could only answer softly with an obedient nod. Miki began the interrogation, asking if Silica had hidden anything during their walk that day. Silica replied that she had not. Miki then asked if Silica had ever met the Witch of the Giant Tower or knew anything about her. With a hollow stare, Silica said she had only seen her from a distance, while the witch was guiding the human prince and princess. Miki thought to herself that she needed to investigate further to find out who the Witch of the Giant Tower truly was. Then, Miki asked if the witch was beautiful. Silica answered yes, although she had never seen her face, because it was covered. The figure's beauty was evident just from her voice and aura. Miki then asked if Silica had ever entered the giant tower. Silica replied that she had only been as far as the first floor. The place was entirely white and featured many large pillars with very high ceilings. Silica added that she had never gone up to the upper floors. Miki asked who lived on the upper floors and if the witch truly resided there. Silica explained that, according to the stories of the prince and princess of the human kingdom, the witch did indeed live in the giant tower, likely on the second floor or higher. Miki nodded in understanding and glanced at the watch on her wrist. Miki realized that over an hour had passed since she began questioning. She decided to end the interrogation for the night, looking at the tired-looking Silica and calling her a good girl. Before stopping, Miki asked one last thing. Did Silica know about something called C? Silica replied that she had never heard of it. Miki thought that this would be difficult to confirm. If C really existed in the giant tower, it was either very well hidden or did not exist at all. Afterward, Miki praised Silica and told her to go back to sleep. Silica obeyed the command instantly and fell into a deep slumber. Watching Silica sleep, Miki smiled sweetly, muttering how cute the girl was. However, dark intentions surfaced in her mind. Miki wondered what kind of cute sounds Silica would make if she tickled her stomach. She restrained herself, realizing that attacking on the first day would cause her cover to fail completely. Miki walked closer and lightly licked Silica's cheek, feeling a surge of lust that was difficult to control. However, Miki eventually pulled away, calming her mind while changing back into her work clothes. Inwardly, Miki chuckled, thinking that once the investigation was over, she might make Silica part of her private collection. Miki briefly considered whether she should take Silica back to the demon state or instead humiliate the fairy servants. After realizing her thoughts were getting strange, Miki slapped her own cheeks and sat at the desk to write her report. In a casual tone, Miki reminded herself that there was still plenty of work to finish that night. Miki then summoned her Vespid monster, the Shadow Bee, which possesses the ability to camouflage itself and is extremely difficult to detect. After boosting its power, Miki commanded the Shadow Bee to deliver a report to the demon state. The monster instantly vanished into the darkness of the night. While gazing at the giant tower from the window, Miki reflected on all the information she had just acquired. The tower's external security was indeed tight, but the interior felt surprisingly lax. Miki suspected this was a form of overconfidence from the tower's residents, who were certain they could eliminate anyone who dared to enter. Miki concluded that it would be impossible for an ordinary intruder or even an experienced master to penetrate the tower without being caught. However, that was exactly what made it so intriguing to her. With a cunning smile, Miki looked at the giant tower shining beneath the red moon, thinking of using the fairy servants and the dragons there as her next targets. Light began that morning at the leveling location with Lilith. Calmly, Light explained that today, Lilith would be trained to increase her level further, assisted by Gold and Nemumu. Light introduced them as members of the Black Clown Party and the bodyguards who would accompany Lilith during the upcoming conference of the 9 nations. Lilith greeted Gold and Nemumu politely, asking for their guidance. Nemumu, introducing herself as Assassin Nemumu, suggested that Lilith need not be so formal. Gold added that they were happy to help Lilith since it was a direct request from Light. Once everyone was ready, Light gave the order to begin the training, and the 3 of them agreed enthusiastically. The battle commenced. After some time, Light noticed that while monsters had been defeated, Lilith's level had not yet increased. Light asked if Lilith was still capable of continuing, and she answered spiritedly that she was still strong. One of Light's followers observed that it was indeed quite difficult for Lilith to reach level 100 inches such a short period. Light began to consider the massive amount of experience points required. He concluded that surface-level monsters provided too little EXP, and although monster summoning items could speed up the process, the risks were too high. If Lilith's level had not yet reached 1000, simply seeing the enemies could cause her to go into shock or die of a heart attack. Realizing this, Light decided to hold back. Suddenly, Lilith called out to Light with a request outside of her leveling concerns. She wanted to tour the giant tower city. Light asked if this was an inspection mission like before, but Lilith explained that this time it was merely a personal wish as a human, not a royal duty. Lilith wanted to see the development and the lives of the people there following the mass migration after the annihilation of the Beastmen. Light eventually understood and promised to arrange a schedule to accompany Lilith to the city. Lilith thanked him for being willing to fulfill her personal request. Light responded casually, reminding her that as a princess, it was natural for her request to be granted. Afterward, they refocused on continuing the leveling session with Gold and Nemumu. The following morning, Silica woke up with a start. She felt as though she had just experienced a strange nightmare. Touching her face, Silica felt a wet sensation, as if an animal had just licked her. With a confused expression, Silica left her room and headed to the kitchen. There, Miki in her cute form was waiting with a cheerful smile, greeting Silica and saying she had prepared a delicious breakfast to make up for yesterday's trouble. Silica was moved and thanked her, and they had breakfast together before preparing to open the shop. After eating, Silica explained the day's work plan. They would help each other for the first day, and only tomorrow would they divide the tasks. Miki agreed enthusiastically and immediately began helping to arrange items on the shelves. While stocking, an item caught Miki's eye. Curious, Miki asked if this was the item known as soap. Silica confirmed it happily, explaining that soap was the best-selling product in the shop. Miki was amazed because the price was much cheaper than outside the city, and Silica explained that the fairy servants sold the soap at a low price. Silica added that the soap was not only cheap but could also prevent diseases if used regularly. The product remained profitable because the fairy servants sold it at wholesale rates. According to Silica, this was part of the fairy servants' efforts to maintain public health at affordable prices while ensuring their products remained popular. Silica showed the soap to Miki, explaining that it was known as fairy servant soap. Miki nodded in understanding, praising the concept. However, the relaxed atmosphere suddenly changed when someone arrived at the shop door. Silica immediately apologized, saying the shop was not yet open and asking the guest to wait, but the person replied that he was not a customer. The visitor turned out to be Gold, Lilith's new bodyguard. Gold explained that he had come to deliver an order. Silica was shocked and hurriedly apologized for not realizing it. Shortly after, Lilith and Nemumu also appeared, carrying several large wooden crates. Miki, having just woken up, was stunned to see the three of them arrive at once. Miki stared at Lilith, Nemumu, and Gold with an expression of shock mixed with delight. Inwardly, Miki felt the situation was sudden but pleasant. Her mind wandered, viewing the presence of three beautiful people at her shop as a sweet morning surprise, and she could only stare at them with an enthusiasm she found hard to hide. Gold, Lilith, and Nemumu entered Silica's shop, helping to carry the ordered wooden crates. Silica felt incredibly grateful, as she usually had to carry items one by one. Lilith noticed Miki helping out and felt as though she had seen Miki's face somewhere before, but she could not recall where. Gold replied that the assistance was no big deal, as it was a knight's duty to help. Silica remained thankful to Gold, Nemumu, and Miki. Inwardly, Miki began to observe them, especially the two newcomers who caught her eye. A black-haired child wearing a mask and a tanned girl with a scarf, whom Miki found exceptionally beautiful. Nemumu responded calmly that helping like this was part of her job. Glancing at Miki, Nemumu thought that this group seemed stronger than ordinary humans. On the other hand, Miki stared at Nemumu's mask and guessed that her face might be covered to hide burn scars. Miki's thoughts drifted far off course, imagining that Nemumu would actually be very handsome and cute if the scars were healed. In her imagination, Miki even envisioned healing Nemumu's face and fantasized about his exaggeratedly grateful reaction. The fantasy grew increasingly bizarre as Miki imagined wild scenarios that only served to increase her excitement. Lilith, who had been observing Miki, called out to Silica and Miki, asking for a moment of their time to ask a question. Lilith introduced herself as Liliana, her pseudonym, and then asked for their thoughts on life in the giant tower city and whether they faced any difficulties living there. Nemumu heard the question and glanced at Light, thinking that a city led by Light through Eli was bound to be well managed. Nemumu felt relieved, certain there were no issues in the city. Miki, however, was still preoccupied with her own thoughts about Nemumu, the tough and beautiful tanned girl. Miki was imagining absurd things about Nemumu and was so lost in thought that Silica had to nudge her gently. Silica then shared her life story. She told them how her parents had been attacked by monsters and how she had nearly died while still a slave. Thanks to the help of the Witch of the Giant Tower and the fairy servants, Silica was able to realize her parents' dream of opening this shop. Silica said her life was now filled with gratitude despite the remaining challenges, and everything felt precious. Lilith listened with empathy, considering that Silica had endured much suffering. Meanwhile, Miki, observing Lilith, thought she looked as innocent as a girl from a small village who had yet to learn the harshness of the outside world, making Miki want to disrupt her innocence. When Lilith asked Miki the same question, Miki immediately switched to her cute mode and responded with a fabricated story. Miki claimed her parents were also traitors who were attacked by monsters, and that she had been rescued from slavery and brought to the giant tower. Miki added that she had only arrived yesterday and didn't know much yet, but felt deeply grateful to the witch and the fairy servants. When Lilith asked about her parents, Miki continued the lie, stating that her father had dreamed of owning his own shop. Miki claimed she was happy to be trusted with helping in Silica's shop, just like her father's dream. Gold, hearing the story, commented to Lilith that Miki must have also faced difficult times in her life. Inwardly, Miki praised her own acting skills. In her view, a lie is more convincing when mixed with a bit of truth. To make the story feel real, Miki even imagined the Dragonute Master named Hisomi as her father, even though she actually disliked him. Lilith responded happily, seeing that both were being treated well at the giant tower. But in her mind, the true infiltrator agent Miki refocused on her mission. Miki thought about summoning scout bees to continue her task of capturing targets, including Silica, if necessary. Lilith then proceeded with her next question, while Nemumu, standing beside her, appeared more vigilant than before. Afterward, Light and Nemumu were seen walking around the city. Nemumu remarked that while Lilith seemed worried about the people, there was no reason for concern. According to her, a city run by Light through Eli was bound to be safe and prosperous, a peaceful place for everyone. However, Nemumu muttered that Lilith was indeed a bit problematic at times. Hearing this, Light remained silent, thinking to himself that everyone in the Abyss already knew about Aoyuki and Eli's distant relationship with Lilith. Light acknowledged Nemumu's concern and said it might just be his feeling, hoping nothing bad would happen. The scene then shifted to the past. In the middle of the Demon State seas, a large man was seen dragging a group of human slaves. One male slave begged for his child's release, but the large man only laughed coldly, calling them nothing more than bait. The slaves were then thrown into the sea without mercy. The large man stood at the edge of the ship, watching the churning sea. He explained that the slaves were merely bait to lure monsters, so he could increase his level. The screams of the slaves pleading for help did not sway him. He even mocked them, saying humans were too noisy despite being more effective than livestock or monsters. As the waves grew higher, the man became irritated because only weak level 300 monsters appeared. He was disappointed by the poor results and considered the risks of heading further offshore to find stronger monsters. Nonetheless, he continued to throw more slaves into the sea, hoping for a big catch this time. Sometime later, the large man was seen relaxing in his chair in a city of the Demon State, grumbling about the lack of good results from his hunt. Suddenly, a bee appeared, the shadow bee carrying Miki's report. The man read the report with glistening eyes and let out a loud, crazed laugh. The large man, whose name was revealed to be Daigo, shouted with joy upon learning that the giant tower housed creatures of level 500 and even 1,000. With a manic expression, Daigo cheered because he finally had worthy targets. He vowed to hunt down everyone at the giant tower and use their souls to increase his own level. Silica explained to Miki about the evacuation drill announced by the ferry servants earlier that afternoon. She said the drill was designed to prepare for the possible appearance of monsters or disasters in the giant tower city. Silica mentioned that all residents must be able to move quickly and orderly if such an event were to occur. Silica added that the drill would take place tomorrow, so they would have to close the shop temporarily. According to her, the exercise was organized by their respective districts, but it still felt sudden since it had never been done before. Hearing this, Miki grew suspicious, wondering if the drill was being held because something was happening behind the scenes. Miki thought to herself that her infiltration might have been discovered. However, she reasoned that if that were the case, they would have arrested her immediately without making excuses. Since there were no signs of that, Miki tried to calm herself, convincing herself that the drill might just be a coincidence. Despite this, Miki remained uneasy. She had a strange sensation of being watched from the shadows by something predatory. Miki began planning a backup strategy, just in case the situation took a turn for the worse. The next day, Lilith spoke over the loudspeakers, announcing the start of the evacuation drill. She explained a disaster simulation involving intense ground tremors and collapsing buildings. All residents were asked to head to the first floor of the giant tower in an orderly fashion, without running or pushing. After the drill concluded, Lilith thanked the citizens for their participation. As a token of appreciation, the Witch of the Giant Tower had prepared breakfast for everyone. The atmosphere immediately became lively and full of spirit as the residents cheered at the news. Silica was enthusiastic about trying the ferry servants' cooking. Miki agreed while enjoying the attention from several men nearby. Inwardly, Miki mocked them as they were not her type at all. But suddenly, Miki slipped and spilled her food onto one of the fairy servants. Miki panicked instantly and apologized. The fairy servant, who was covered in broth, only smiled casually and said it was fine since only her clothes were dirty. She even offered a change of clothes and promised to wash Miki's outfit as well. Another fairy servant added that stains could set if not cleaned immediately, so it would be better for Miki to change first. Silica suggested that Miki eat later. Miki eventually followed the suggestion and accompanied the fairy servant to change her clothes. The fairy servant guided Miki up a spiral staircase toward a room inside the giant tower. Inwardly, Miki felt fortunate to be entering an area that was usually closed to the public. As soon as the lights came on, Miki was startled to see Ice Heat, the assistant head maid, who has two-toned red and blue hair. The fairy servant accompanying Miki greeted Ice Heat and explained the food incident. Ice Heat appeared irritated, jotting something down with a pen while reprimanding her subordinate for causing trouble in front of the people. Afterward, Ice Heat apologized directly to Miki and offered to take over the task from her subordinate. Struck by awe, Miki could only nod, while Ice Heat introduced herself and invited Miki to follow her lead. Inwardly, Miki was thrilled to meet a high-ranking fairy servant like Ice Heat in person. As they walked, Miki thought her infiltration mission was turning out to be more enjoyable than expected. She even fantasized about taking Ice Heat home with her once the mission was complete. They reached a large hall with grand doors. The fairy servant told Miki she could wait there while the change of clothes was prepared. Miki declined assistance with changing, feeling it was enough just to wait. The fairy servant thanked her for her politeness before turning on the hall lights. When Miki entered, the room was still dark and vast. Once the lights shone brightly, Miki was frozen in place. Standing before her was Nazuna with a bright smile, alongside Light, who welcomed Miki warmly. Light greeted her calmly, welcoming her to the giant tower. Nazuna smiled beside him, while Miki stood frozen, feeling a mixture of awe and intimidation from the reception. In the giant tower hall, Light stood with Nazuna and Ice Heat. Miki appeared in her small form and immediately greeted Ice Heat with an anxious face. Ice Heat had come not for a trivial matter, but to change Miki's clothes. However, Miki overreacted, pretending to be shy and acting spoiled, as if she didn't want to change in front of a boy. Light looked at Miki seriously and stated that his arrival was not about clothes, but to subdue her. Miki's expression turned to shock, assuming Light was infatuated and trying to flirt. Miki's cute act became even more exaggerated, leaving Nazuna and Ice Heat deathly irritated by her antics. Light asserted that all of Miki's lies had been exposed. He explained that Miki had falsified her identity, even her claim about her squinty-eyed merchant father. This statement shocked Miki, as she realized the references she used had backfired. Light said they had traced Miki's past and found solid evidence. Light added that they used appraisal to confirm everything. Miki initially thought an ordinary appraisal wouldn't penetrate her fake status, but realized a powerful version could expose her. Light then revealed that the appraisal was performed by Mei using the SSR skill Shadow Self, a rare single-use item. From the appraisal results, Mei discovered that Miki was actually a human of unknown level with a gift called Beemancer. Miki immediately feigned shock and played the victim, claiming to be an orphan whose parents were killed by monsters. Light remained calm, knowing Miki was just lying. Ice Heat, already annoyed, moved immediately upon Light's command. With blazing heat energy, Ice Heat fired ice bullets at Miki. The attack pierced Miki and forced her out of her hypnosis, revealing her true form as a master. In that state, Miki grew furious and cursed them for attacking her so abruptly. Light looked at Miki with a calm smile and said that she had finally shown her true colors. Ice Heat glared at her while a frustrated Miki drew a card from her hand, summoning killer bee monsters. The tower hall was instantly filled with a swarm of giant bees with sharp stingers, ready to attack. In her small form again, Miki began to think fast. Her bee's power was limited, but Miki had high combat capability to compensate. Light prepared a defense card, aware that he was not the primary fighter and was better suited as support. The situation grew tense as the bee swarm began to close in. Miki tried to escape by holding up a Skyrunner Wings magic card, shouting to get out of the tower. However, the card failed to work. Light explained that the giant tower had an anti-teleportation system, making all escape magic futile. Miki panicked, realizing her only way out was sealed shut. Light immediately launched a combination attack with Ice Heat. Using Light's Prometheus spell and Ice Heat's Firestorm, they created a massive firestorm that consumed all of Miki's killer bees. The heat explosion shook the hall and destroyed a large portion of the floor. After the explosion subsided, Miki fell to the floor in her true form, wounded and helpless. Light walked over and stood over her, commanding Miki to stay calm and start talking. Light demanded a full explanation of her reasons for coming to the tower and the organizations that might be involved. Miki could only lie there powerless, utterly defeated under their pressure. Miki, in her master form, lay there after being attacked, screaming in pain as her body hit the hall floor. Light and Ice Heat watched as Miki quickly stood up again, preparing a summoning card to call forth her bee army, consisting of acid bees, steel bees, and explosive bees. Instantly, the hall was filled with a ferocious swarm ready for battle. A massive explosion sent debris flying and bees scattered broken across the floor. Light and Ice Heat were pushed back slightly by the shockwave. An enraged Miki screamed, cursing them for calling her a bee woman, and ordered the explosive bees to gather on the wall and detonate. She muttered to herself, making sure she wouldn't be caught in the blast. Miki's command caused the explosive bees to cling to the wall and detonate violently. The explosion opened a small hole in the tower wall. Miki was delighted to have created a gap, certain it was her way out. She cheered enthusiastically, planning to repeat the explosions to widen the hole and escape. However, before she could flee, the wall began to repair itself. Miki stared in shock, shouting because she didn't expect the tower walls to regenerate. Her effort to blow up the wall was in vain, and frustration took over her face as her escape plan crumbled. Light casually explained that the giant tower had an auto-repair mechanism. Just as in the fight against the White Knight, Eli had linked her magic to the tower so that any minor damage would recover. Light also mentioned that Mei and Orca were guarding the city, Aoyuki was monitoring the perimeter, and Chaos was on standby and the Abyss escape was not an option. Calmly, Light advised Miki to stop acting foolishly and surrender. Light promised a degree of mercy if she cooperated. Miki looked panicked and bewildered, wondering who these powerful people before her were. She realized her situation was worsening and began to regret the decision she had made from the start. Miki then reflected, remembering that the master of the Dragonute Empire was investigating the tower. She had come to confirm things, but her decision had turned into a disaster. Light responded with curiosity regarding the master of the Dragonute Empire, making Miki even more annoyed and suspicious that this was all a trap. In her rage, Miki was convinced that this trouble was the fault of the other masters. She named people like Hiro, the pretty boy, Hisomi, the squinty-eyed, the crazy bomber, Fishman, Gaudy, Kaiser, and Imohei. Miki cursed, regretting ever taking the mission. Hearing those names, Light began to think deeply, linking them to memories from Eli. Light realized that Hisomi was indeed one of the masters, and that there appeared to be 5 others in the Dragonute Empire. Light then told Miki that her knowledge was too deep to be left alone. Therefore, Light decided to capture Miki and interrogate her directly. Miki was shocked and incredulous at the decision. Ice Heat glared at Miki and asked if she truly worked for the Dragonute Masters. Ice Heat found it strange if Miki herself knew nothing about them. Light replied casually, saying they would capture Miki and force her to talk regardless of her relationship with the Dragonute Masters. Miki appeared confused and increasingly panicked. She realized that while Light and Ice Heat were not part of the Dragonute Masters, their strength was beyond logic. Miki thought fast and suddenly exclaimed that all these abilities might be due to the existence of someone named C-sama. Light was confused by the name and asked who C was. Miki misunderstood and was convinced Light was pretending. She cried out that the great sea Zamaa must be there, assuming light and ice heat were allies of sea. Miki even asked where sea Zamaa was, looking enthusiastic as if she had found a ray of hope. However, Light remained bewildered by the assumption. Light thought that the title, the Great Sea Zamaa, might be related to the mysterious master previously referred to as Cover. From all the clues, Light suspected Miki was a subordinate or worshipper of this sea figure. Miki, hearing Light ask who Sea was even more shocked and panicked. Miki couldn't believe Light could be so strong without knowing Sea Zamaa. She screamed loudly because it made no sense to her that such power could exist without Sea's help. Fear was evident on Miki's face as Light stood tall before her, leaving her screaming in confusion and terror. Suddenly, a massive tremor shook the giant tower, followed by a loud explosion. Light was startled, trying to find the source of the sound. Miki, still on the floor, was also frozen, not knowing what was happening outside. The explosion was powerful enough to make the hall floor shake. Meanwhile, outside the giant tower, Daigo was fighting a swarm of high-level monsters. With manic energy, Daigo shouted that all these monsters would be materials to increase his level. He laughed loudly, enjoying the brutal battle amidst explosions and scattered debris, unaware that his actions were shaking the entire tower from the outside. Daigo stood before a swarm of massive monsters surrounding the giant tower. A wide grin appeared on his face as his eyes glared ferociously at the creatures. To Daigo, this place was perfect, filled with high-level monsters that could be used as tools to level up quickly. His fighting spirit had reached its peak the moment he stepped foot there. Without hesitation, Daigo leaped into the center of the fray and slashed at the massive monster before him. His voice echoed as he shouted that he would slaughter every monster in the area just to raise his level. The malevolent aura surrounding his body grew denser, causing the ground beneath him to tremble under the energy pressure of his rage. That rage intensified as Daigo recalled someone he referred to as Hei. In his mind, Light was the primary enemy who had to be eliminated. With a cry full of hatred, Daigo vowed to hunt and kill anyone who stood in his way, solely to equal Hei's strength or even surpass it. Bitter memories surfaced in his head. Daigo remembered a time when his body lay broken, severely wounded after a humiliating defeat. Back then, after their failure, they had split into two different camps, Daigo to the Dragonu Empire faction, while Light went to the Demon State faction. They had met again in a dungeon, and the wounds he received from that encounter still lingered in his memory. Daigo could still feel the pain and humiliation he had endured. In a burning rage, Daigo swore he would never forget. His shout echoed, stating that he didn't care if they came from the same place. To him, once his level reached its maximum and his swords could be used to their full potential, Light would be his final victim. With burning intent, Daigo returned to the battlefield. His voice was loud as he called the monsters before him a field of EXP that would serve as fuel for his ambition. Those massive monsters looked terrifying, but Daigo was not deterred in the least. Instead, he grew more excited at the sight of new prey ready to be hunted. However, several monsters suddenly fled. Daigo shouted in anger, ordering them to stop, but his steps came to an abrupt halt when a massive shadow appeared before him. The foot of a giant creature slammed into the ground right in front of him, forcing Daigo to look up and see Orca alongside a glowing giant wolf and a mysterious man. The man was Chaos, sitting atop the back of a giant wolf named Fenrir. Chaos calmly introduced the celestial beast as the progenitor Fenrir, a legendary creature of extraordinary power. Fenrir looked majestic, its eyes flashing sharply as it stared at Daigo, who stood ready to fight. Chaos gave the order for Fenrir to capture the foolish intruder before them. Fenrir immediately howled, creating a windstorm around itself before dashing toward Daigo with incredible speed. Its movements were like lightning, causing the surrounding ground to crack due to its sheer velocity. Daigo remained defiant, dismissively referring to Fenrir as a little dog. At that moment, Orca's wings spread wide and released a massive energy blast toward Daigo, but Daigo dodged it nimbly. His face showed a mix of irritation and curiosity regarding his opponent's strength. Fenrir attacked again. But strangely, the attacks kept missing. Chaos looked puzzled. He had previously ordered Fenrir to hold back so as not to kill Daigo, but that didn't mean missing entirely. It was as if the attacks were intentionally unable to hit the target, leading Chaos to suspect that something was amiss. Chaos was shocked when he realized that Daigo wasn't just dodging, but was making Fenrir's attacks miss on purpose. Fenrir, who should have been incapable of failure, kept losing its direction. Daigo laughed arrogantly, calling the level 9000 creature delicious prey. Chaos began to realize that the intruder before him was no ordinary person. The battle grew more heated as Chaos and Fenrir stared at Daigo, who stood confidently with a cunning smile. Chaos knew this intruder possessed something yet unknown. Meanwhile, Daigo prepared to counterattack, shouting with ambition that he would kill both Fenrir and Chaos to gain a massive amount of EXP from them. Daigo stood tall before progenitor Fenrir and Chaos with a wild gaze full of battle lust. His voice was loud as he cheered at finding level 9000 prey that had appeared out of nowhere. Without hesitation, Daigo saw this as a golden opportunity to raise his level. Chaos, hearing this, looked alarmed, realizing how dangerous the opponent before him truly was. Daigo immediately attacked progenitor Fenrir with his twin swords, but the strike missed. Daigo exclaimed that his intention was to cut Fenrir's legs, but noted that a level 9000 monster was indeed different. Progenitor Fenrir growled loudly, startled by Daigo's speed, while Chaos watched with a bewildered expression, trying to comprehend what was actually happening. Daigo's second attack brought a surprise. Even though his sword was only aimed at Fenrir's leg, the limb was suddenly sliced without any direct touch. Progenitor Fenrir roared in pain, its voice echoing loudly through the air. Chaos was stunned by the result, unable to understand how Daigo could wound such a powerful creature just by moving his sword without physical contact. Daigo smiled cunningly, satisfied with the result of his attack. Chaos, observing closely, realized something was wrong, as Daigo's attack didn't seem to land but still inflicted a real wound. From this, Chaos immediately knew that fighting him there would be futile and posed a great risk to the giant tower, which was located too close to the battlefield. Chaos made a quick decision and ordered progenitor Fenrir to lead Daigo away from the city. Chaos stated that Fenrir was now the primary target and must draw the enemy as far away as possible while attempting to defeat him. Progenitor Fenrir roared loudly and immediately leaped away at high speed, leaving a startled Daigo behind. Refusing to let them go, Daigo hurriedly gave chase, shouting for Fenrir not to run. Chaos, still on Fenrir's back, reminded the creature to use the trees as cover and to avoid Daigo's strange attacks at all costs. Both knew that even a single careless blow could be fatal. When Daigo leaped into the air, he suddenly began to hover and fly, taking Chaos by surprise. Chaos realized that while Fenrir was faster on land, Daigo held the advantage in the air due to the lack of obstacles. Chaos worried that Daigo could launch a barrage of attacks from above, while progenitor Fenrir roared, preparing to fight back. Chaos finally agreed to the tactic Fenrir requested. Progenitor Fenrir immediately attacked with full power, launching a devastating combined assault of ice and wind. Its piercing howl rang out as the frozen energy surged toward the ground, creating a massive shockwave that devastated the battle area in an instant. A massive explosion followed. The ground shattered, and the air turned freezing cold. Daigo stared at the attack with wide eyes before the massive blast shook everything. Inside the giant tower, Light felt the heavy tremors and was startled, wondering what was happening outside as the vibrations reached the very walls of the tower. Smoke and dust enveloped the entire battlefield, obscuring the view of the giant tower from the outside. As things began to settle, Daigo was seen standing tall amidst the destruction, completely unharmed. Progenitor Fenrir was shocked and growled, unable to believe that such a powerful attack had yielded no results. Chaos watched with a shocked expression, realizing that Fenrir's previous move was an ice attribute attack powerful enough to kill even a level 9,999 opponent. Chaos knew that without any defense, it was impossible for someone to survive that attack. Yet Daigo didn't have a single scratch on him. Daigo looked at Fenrir with a haughty smile, then raised his twin swords, stating proudly that surviving such attacks was his specialty. Progenitor Fenrir immediately roared in anger and launched its next attack, but Daigo slashed back, cutting through Fenrir's fur and drawing blood. Chaos saw this and grew even more shocked because Daigo's attack looked like a simple swing of a sword. Inwardly, Chaos admitted that Daigo's level was indeed higher, but he still felt it was strange because the effects of the attacks defied logic. Meanwhile, Daigo gazed at his twin swords with a wicked smile, realizing the weapon gave him an extraordinary advantage. He was determined to master it fully, to raise his level quickly. Daigo then looked at Progenitor Fenrir and challenged the beast loudly, ordering it to give him EXP so his level would rise. With utter arrogance, Daigo shouted that he would kill the little dog, Fenrir. Progenitor Fenrir only growled in rage, while Chaos, on its back, now fully understood the true danger of the enemy they were facing. A massive battle broke out outside the giant tower. Daigo, the heavily muscled man, stood facing Progenitor Fenrir, who growled fiercely. Aoyuki, standing in front, stared at both of them while gritting her teeth. The tension between them was heavy, as if the surrounding air itself was holding its breath. Light looked at the newly returned Aoyuki and asked about the previous tremors. Aoyuki answered sheepishly, admitting that she and Progenitor Fenrir could not handle the intruder alone. With a serious tone, Aoyuki added that Nazuna's strength might be needed to defeat the interloper. Seeing Aoyuki's expression, Light fell into thought. He reasoned that if Aoyuki had gone as far as admitting her inability and asking for Nazuna's help, then this enemy was truly dangerous. Light understood that all of this was to protect him, the abyss, and the giant tower. He then glanced at the still unconscious Miki, certain that this intruder was no ordinary foe. Miki, returning to her own schemes, found it strange that the leveling freak had actually come based only on her first report. Usually, Miki would beat someone like that, but this time she decided to trust in the power of her companion's twin swords. Miki calmly prepared her next strategy. A surge of excitement exploded within Miki. She felt proud because the twin swords her companion used were the strongest mythological class weapons. Inwardly, Miki thought the weapon was so extraordinary it sharpened her own battle lust. Smiling, Miki felt this could be her chance to escape. Light observed Miki's reaction and could guess what she was thinking. He realized Miki was entirely confident in the strength of her companion's mythological swords. In his mind, Light considered Miki's strange offer, which seemed to give him a choice to surrender submissively in exchange for mercy. Miki then observed Daigo's sword from a distance. She admitted that Nazuna's Prometheus sword was incredibly powerful, absurdly so. Miki thought that if the leveling freak were to go on a rampage, everyone nearby would be affected, including the humans in the giant tower city. After considering it, Miki offered Light a deal. She asked for permission to leave with Silica and several fairy servants. In exchange, she would persuade her companion to withdraw without causing casualties. Light instead looked at Nazuna and ordered her to capture the intruder with him, while Ice Heat was tasked with guarding the area. Nazuna responded enthusiastically, leaving the ignored Miki feeling frustrated. Miki protested being dismissed, even threatening to take Silica herself if she wasn't listened to. However, Light continued giving orders to Eli to summon Mera, Jack, and Suzu to take their places before he left with Nazuna. Seeing herself threatened, Miki had no choice but to resign herself. After Light and Nazuna left, Miki shouted at Ice Heat to let her go. Miki warned that Daigo was extremely strong and they would regret keeping her there. However, Ice Heat only looked at her seriously and warned her not to underestimate her master. Ice Heat raised her weapon toward Miki and asserted that no matter how strong Daigo was, the power of Light and Nazuna was far superior. Ice Heat added that Miki should be more worried about her own safety. Those words shocked Miki, who realized her situation was taking a turn for the worse. Inwardly, Miki knew her situation was dire. She did have one final trump card, but using it required significant leveling and a massive amount of energy. Just thinking about it gave Miki a headache. Therefore, Miki vowed not to use it unless absolutely forced to. All of this, Miki thought, was happening because of their master's long journey. A few moments later, Mera, Jack, and Suzu arrived. They looked at Miki with varying expressions. Suzu remarked casually that Miki was not the kind of girl she'd want as a little sister. Jack scolded her for the rude remark, but Mera simply sneered, calling Miki a fool for daring to challenge the giant tower. Meanwhile, Light ordered Nazuna to exit through the nearest door and assist Fenrir, who was fighting in the forest. Nazuna answered with high spirits, but insisted she could handle everything herself to protect the city, her friends, and Light. Light smiled at Nazuna and told her that this time he would fight alongside her. In his mind, Light recalled a past event when a hellhound serpent nearly killed him several years ago. That memory briefly froze his body, but now, all of that was in the past. Light even considered the monsters part of the Abyss family. However, upon hearing the news that one of their family members had been killed, Light's anger exploded. His hands clenched tightly, and his gaze turned sharp. Light felt he could not stand idly by while his family was treated that way. Nazuna, seeing the change in his expression, could only tremble in fear. Light vowed to make the perpetrator pay dearly for his actions. With eyes full of rage, Light was determined to carve Daigo's sins into the depths of his soul, casting him into the darkest suffering in the deepest part of the Abyss, alongside Garo, Sasha, Sionne, and Nano. A terrified Nazuna even apologized because her master looked so frightening. However, Light calmed her with a gentle smile while stroking her head. Feeling relieved, Nazuna immediately hugged Light while joking playfully, warming the atmosphere for a moment. Afterward, Light stared ahead with a sharp, determined gaze. Nazuna stood beside him, ready to fight together. Both stepped forward, preparing to face the battle outside the giant tower. In a calm but firm tone, Light led the way, and Nazuna answered with a loud, spirited voice. 4 people, Jack, Mera, Suzu, and Ice Heat, were seen walking away from a building. Meanwhile, Miki felt the time was right to use her trump card. However, Miki suddenly panicked as her appraisal ability was blocked when she looked at the 3 figures before her: a small girl, a tall woman, and a muscular man. The focus shifted to Miki as she attempted to analyze her opponents. Her eyes were tense because the data appearing around the 3 characters was incomplete, indicating that something was obstructing her ability. The situation grew strained as the aura from the 3 individuals felt increasingly powerful in the air. Ice Heat apologized for calling the others, but explained that she wanted to handle it herself. Mera felt that Ice Heat wanted to monopolize the credit, but Ice Heat honestly admitted it was a direct order from Light to capture the woman. She was determined to see it through to the end for the master. Jack reminded her that it would be too risky for Ice Heat to do it alone. From a security standpoint, it would be better if they attacked together. However, Suzu instead asked if Ice Heat intended to defy Light's orders. The atmosphere among them grew somewhat tense. Ice Heat explained that she did not intend to be rebellious. She simply wanted to demonstrate her loyalty to the master. During the wars with the dwarves and beastmen, Jack, Mera, and Suzu saw a lot of action. While Ice Heat had not played much of a role since the defeat of the elves at the giant tower, now she wanted to seize this opportunity. Jack and Mera smiled upon hearing Ice Heat's reasoning. Jack remarked that for that very reason, Ice Heat wouldn't get another turn later. However, they still couldn't relax because of the orders from their comrade. Ice Heat emphasized that being idle in the face of the master's orders was unacceptable. Ice Heat asked Jack to grant her wish this time. With a confident smile, she said that if she couldn't win on her own, Jack would surely help her. Jack laughed and gave a thumbs up. saying that if it was his sister's selfishness, he would jump in to help immediately if things took a turn for the worse. Mera laughed cynically, wondering how Ice Heat could be willing to swallow her pride for something like this. Even the little girl beside her looked shocked. Ice Heat then reminded them that Suzu was also practicing her cooking for Light's sake, so she too wanted to do something in return. She hoped this chance would be given to her. Suzu finally granted permission, provided they could intervene if the situation became dangerous. Ice Heat thanked Suzu, Rock, and Mera. Mera only responded cynically, accusing Ice Heat of just needing a stage to show off, but nonetheless agreed not to interfere. In exchange, Mera asked Ice Heat to treat her to drinks once they returned to the abyss. Ice Heat agreed, telling Mera to drink as much as she liked. After that, she thanked everyone before rushing toward her target with full enthusiasm. Ice Heat introduced herself as the ultra-rare grappler of Flame and Frost, Ice Heat, level unknown. An aura of fire and ice enveloped her body as she stepped forward. With a burning spirit, she prepared to begin the great battle. Ice Heat's attack was launched rapidly, leaving a trail of energy in the air. Miki looked shocked, Jack cried out in admiration, and Suzu was stunned. Mera merely laughed cynically at Ice Heat's style. Miki managed to dodge and began to take notice of Suzu standing behind her. Miki stared at Suzu with sparkling eyes, declaring it was love at first sight. In an exaggerated manner, Miki even asked Suzu to be her husband, wife, and mother. Suzu was in shock, while Ice Heat and Mera could only stare blankly, stressed by her behavior. Miki continued to praise Suzu incessantly, her dark hair, shimmering eyes, fair skin, and tight clothing that perfectly suited Miki's taste. Suzu turned red with embarrassment. Miki bowed slightly and revealed she knew Suzu was a double gunner. Then, innocently yet eccentrically, Miki concluded that Suzu possessed both genders at once, something that made her even more infatuated. Suzu was so startled she began to tremble. Miki grew more excited and again asked Suzu to marry her. Suzu tried to decline politely through Rock, her favorite rifle, who said that his partner refused. But Miki remained persistent, refusing to accept a rejection at all. Suzu tried to explain that they were currently enemies and could not possibly marry, but Miki casually replied that if she were captured, wouldn't that mean she would always be by Suzu's side? Jack felt disgusted hearing this, while Mera responded with a cynical laugh. Suddenly, Miki summoned a small bee called the Vow Bee. Enthusiastically, Miki recited the Vow Bee incantation, causing her opponent's body to glow with a strange magical effect. Everyone was shocked, and even Mera was confused, not understanding what was happening. After that surprise attack, Miki's attitude suddenly shifted. In a sweet tone, Miki addressed Suzu with a pet name and invited her to be friends first. Jack, Suzu, and Mera stood in silent bewilderment at this extreme and unpredictable change. Meanwhile, Ice Heat, who had been clipped by Miki's attack, was seen moving away quickly. Miki smiled with satisfaction at the result. Mera trembled, commenting that the whole thing was truly horrifying in many ways. Jack and Mera could only watch Ice Heat's retreating back, while Mera laughed softly with clear awkwardness. On top of the truncated pyramid-shaped tower, Nazuna, Light, and Aoyuki stood ready for battle. Aoyuki respectfully thanked Light for his help and requested that the rest be left to them. An enthusiastic Nazuna immediately asserted that she would protect Light with all her strength. Light reflected on the fact that Fenrir's attacks had failed to hit the enemy. In his view, the attacks didn't miss by mistake, but seemed to intentionally avoid the target. Light thought it was impossible for the progenitor Fenrir to be that careless, especially under Aoyuki's orders. He began to suspect that this enemy belonged to the strongest mythological class, as Miki had mentioned earlier. Irritated, Light wanted to attack the man immediately for tormenting his comrades, but he held himself back. He realized he didn't yet know his enemy's abilities, so he needed to be cautious. Light had already devised a strategy, ordering Mei to protect the giant tower city with magic string magic and asking Orca to use calming magic in the residential areas. Light then shouted in anger, cursing the X-faced enemy who was the source of this chaos. Nazuna also triggered by rage, immediately attacked with such force that explosions erupted around Daigo. Nazuna would not accept her friends being hurt and was determined to retaliate without mercy. A close-quarters battle began between Nazuna and Daigo. Daigo tried to parry every one of Nazuna's slashes, but her attacks rained down incessantly. A massive explosion occurred, demonstrating the sheer power of Fenrir within Nazuna's body as she blasted the battlefield. Light observed the results of Nazuna's attack. He noticed that some of the attacks were actually being deflected. The strikes seemed to have a will of their own, avoiding Daigo. Light concluded that the enemy had the ability to dampen attacks while parrying with his sword. He began to suspect the weapon possessed strange mythological capabilities. Light surmised that Daigo's weapon might be a mythological class weapon that could negate long-range attacks but was weak at close range. He wasn't certain yet, but the feeling grew stronger after seeing the effects of Nazuna's strikes. Daigo then looked at the woman who had arrived and cheered enthusiastically, noting that his opponent this time was a level 9,999 brat. Daigo laughed with satisfaction, feeling lucky. He considered the place a leveling paradise because it was full of strong opponents. Meanwhile, Light remained vigilant and assessed his foe. The appraisal results showed that some data failed to read. Level 7,000, human male, gift unknown, swordsman Daigo. Light concluded this was the highest level they had ever faced. Light was certain Daigo's immense confidence was not without reason. It had to be because of the mythological class weapon he held. Aoyuki also noticed that Daigo's twin swords had the ability to interfere with the appraisal process. Nazuna attacked again with full emotion, but Daigo was still able to withstand her strikes. Nazuna growled in irritation because her sword had difficulty hitting the target, leaving her frustrated. Light immediately launched a powerful spell called Bursting Blaze, blowing up the area where Daigo stood. However, after the massive explosion subsided, Daigo was still standing uninjured, leaving Light stunned. Daigo laughed mockingly at them all, saying the place was very prosperous because it was full of strong people. Light could only stand there in silent wonder, questioning his enemy's sanity. From his observations, Light realized Daigo had an active appraisal interference ability that made his status difficult to read. Light realized Daigo was guessing his strength based on the effects of the previous attacks, and considered him to be on the same level as Nazuna. This irritated Light, as Daigo still saw them merely as prey to increase his level. Daigo's confidence became even more apparent as he prepared to devour all his enemies to reach level 9,999. Daigo shouted enthusiastically and immediately attacked at high speed. Nazuna warned Light just before the attack landed. Quickly, Nazuna activated her Prometheus ability to alter fate and heal her wounds. Meanwhile, Mera contacted Light via telepathy. Mera chuckled and commented that Daigo could even leave a scratch on Nazuna's armor, proving the power of his mythological weapon. Light responded, asking what was happening, while launching the SSR magic attack Solar Ray toward Daigo. However, the swift beam missed and split the sky as it was deflected. Nazuna immediately attacked from the air, directing her spinning weapon toward Daigo while vowing not to let Light be hurt. Daigo fought back while mocking her, but Nazuna continued to press on with the power of Fenrir. Despite this, Daigo was still able to hold his ground. Nazuna repeated her Prometheus incantation to recover from the wounds inflicted by Daigo. Hovering in the air, Nazuna shouted with determination that she would not stop attacking until Daigo truly fell. Her attack created a massive explosion that shook the field. Daigo was slammed into the ground with a loud cry, while light and dust obscured the view. Nazuna appeared before Daigo as he was trying to flee. Light asked Mera to be brief as they were still fighting. Mera agreed casually and began explaining about Miki. She said that Miki had fallen in love with Suzu at first sight and decided to defect without a fight. Light was shocked to hear this. Mera added that Miki even said she wanted to live with Suzu, have babies, and be owned completely. However, Suzu did not seem to like the idea. Light admitted he found it difficult to understand Mera's explanation, and Mera agreed, laughing softly. Mera ended the telepathy by saying that although they didn't quite understand it, Miki had provided important information in return. That information was about Daigo's mythological class weapon. The final panel showed the two shimmering twin swords with the inscription Spirit Twin Swords, the blades that command the spirits. Light sat in thought, trying to understand the strange power Daigo possessed. After thinking it over, Light concluded that Daigo had fire and ice spirits that could serve as protection against long-range attacks, and could also use those spirits to weaken close-range strikes. But the more he thought about it, the more something felt off. Light remembered Miki's words about Daigo's weapon being called the strongest mythological class. From that, Light began to suspect that the power came from Daigo's ability to control spirits. Perhaps that was why his weapon was said to be so strong. However, recalling Miki's explanation that Daigo was just talking nonsense about that title, Light felt it was likely just a one-sided claim. Light tentatively concluded that perhaps the weapon could create spirits capable of doing anything, which is why it was called the strongest. But suddenly a question arose in his mind. If the weapon were truly that powerful, why hadn't Daigo been able to defeat any of them yet? Mera, having just returned, explained that Daigo had not yet been able to use the sword's full power. Apparently, Daigo himself had told Miki that he couldn't unleash 100% of its strength because his level wasn't high enough. Hearing this, Light finally understood why Daigo was so obsessed with increasing his level. Light vowed not to let that happen. Light then activated the SSSR True Sight card to see the spirits around Daigo's swords. From there, it was clearly visible that Daigo stood with the twin swords in his hands, surrounded by spirits in various forms, such as small fairies and tiny dragons floating in the air. All of this proved that Light's suspicion was correct. Daigo appeared shocked the moment he realized his secret had been exposed. He realized that Miki had leaked his information to the enemy. Enraged, Daigo commanded the wind spirits to attack Nazuna. The attack formed a vortex that was directed straight at Nazuna in midair. With a dismissive tone, Daigo asserted that since he now knew Nazuna's fighting style, she was no longer a match for him. He even claimed that Nazuna was unworthy of fighting Aoyuki. Upon hearing this, an infuriated Nazuna immediately attacked from the air. Daigo summoned multiple spirits at once, ranging from the chain spirit and alluring spirit to the shield spirit. He used all these spirits for both defense and offense, intending to stop Nazuna's relentless pressure. The battle grew even more intense, and Daigo smirked while mocking her, deeming Nazuna's attacks futile. Nazuna's attack finally landed on Daigo, creating a massive explosion. However, Daigo laughed and said that Nazuna had been deceived. Light, watching from a distance, suddenly realized something specifically, how Daigo was able to manipulate fate within that battle. Nazuna continued her ceaseless assault, and while swinging her blade, she invoked the Prometheus technique. Daigo tried to parry while shouting for Nazuna not to kill him, but the attack was too powerful. Daigo's body was sent flying, and his screams echoed across the battlefield, which had been devastated by the explosions. Nazuna stood tall with a confident smile. Looking at the thrown and prone Daigo, she remarked that now that his strange power had been figured out, the battle was over. According to Nazuna, Daigo no longer had any chance of winning. Nazuna stood tall, gripping her sword, while Daigo appeared to be in great pain after taking a direct hit. He was gasping for breath, his body trembling from the excruciating pain. Nazuna explained that the master's order was to capture Daigo alive so they could extract information from him. Therefore, her attack was intentionally non-lethal. Nazuna added that Daigo was lucky to be alive because he had unconsciously blocked part of the attack. Light, standing nearby, praised Nazuna's success and told her to secure Daigo immediately. However, before they could move, the fallen Daigo began to crawl with rage, screaming that he wanted to kill them both. Daigo screamed louder, his eyes bulging with hatred because he felt he was being treated like an insect. His rage reached a breaking point as his hand gripped the chains connected to his twin swords. Seeing this, Light and Nazuna were startled, not yet understanding what Daigo was planning. Without hesitation, Daigo plunged both swords into his own body. Watching from a distance, Nazuna initially thought Daigo was attempting suicide to avoid capture. But his action was not meant for death. Instead, it activated the weapon fusion technique. The two swords literally merged with his body and remained embedded in his chest, leaving two holes that held the chains. Once the fusion was complete, Daigo's body began to transform. His veins bulged, his eyes glowed a fiery red, and his aura became even wilder. Light stood frozen at the sight, never expecting Daigo to actually thrust the weapons into his own body. Now Daigo stood at a distance with an expression of pure arrogance, feeling invincible. With a booming voice, Daigo boasted that in heaven and on earth, he alone was the most exalted. Light and Nezuna, standing in the middle of the forest, immediately felt something strange. Nezuna looked shocked, while Light realized his body suddenly felt heavy, as if his strength were being drained away. Light checked his status through an appraisal card and found that all their statistics had dropped drastically. At the same time, Daigo appeared with a satisfied smile, revealing his gift called In Heaven and on Earth, I am the most exalted. This power forced his enemy's stats down while boosting the stats of all his allies, including himself. Light was shocked by the explanation, especially after seeing a massive eye open within a terrifying black hole behind Daigo. From there, a giant spirit with many hands emerged, radiating a horrific, deep red aura. This was the result of Daigo's fully activated weapon fusion. Daigo explained that through his weapon fusion gift, he could merge with the spirits of his twin swords and unleash his maximum power. Light, still in disbelief, wondered how Daigo could have two gifts at once, since humans are typically limited to one. Daigo laughed loudly, stating that only the weak are limited to a single gift. With a wide, arrogant grin, Daigo stood before the giant spirit manifestation behind him and declared with full conviction that he was the only one in the world who possessed two gifts. A red aura enveloped the surroundings, signaling that his true power had just fully awakened. Light stared at Daigo, who now stood surrounded by the horrific-looking giant spirit. While reflecting, Light tried to process Daigo's claim about having two gifts. Daigo answered with pure arrogance, calling himself special and on a completely different level from Light. After that, Daigo immediately prepared to attack with murderous intent to increase his level. With a cry of rage, Daigo summoned the spirit of death and ordered it to slaughter everyone he considered an enemy. The spirit immediately launched a destructive attack that created a massive explosion in the forest. Trees were pulverized, the ground was split open, and Light was briefly startled by the sheer power. Daigo laughed loudly with arrogance, feeling he had become the strongest being in the world. He referred to everyone before him as mere EXP farms to strengthen himself. The massive spirit floating in the sky joined in with a hateful scream, creating a chilling atmosphere on the battlefield. Suddenly, Daigo was struck hard in the face and sent flying backward. The attack came from Light, who leaped high and struck directly with his bladed gauntlet. The blow caused the ground around them to shake violently. Light continued to press the attack with high speed. His long-range strikes even caused massive explosions. But Daigo still managed to dodge. The giant spirit of death loomed behind him, protecting Daigo, who was now growing angry and shocked by Light's strength. Light briefly thought his attack was strong enough to knock Daigo unconscious, but it wasn't. He realized his power might be weakened due to the stat reduction effect of Daigo's gift. Meanwhile, an enraged Daigo screamed through the mouth of the death spirit attached to his body, finding it impossible that Light was still alive after being attacked by the spirit of death. Light explained while showing an SSR self-sacrifice card. The card can intercept instant death attacks and replace them with the user's sacrifice. Although it was a single-use item, Light said that such cards were not rare for him, as he always had many and distributed them to all his subordinates. Daigo now knelt on the ground, his body covered in wounds, while Light stood before him. Casually, Light asked how much longer Daigo intended to stay in that position. Light then concluded that the reason Daigo only used his weapon fusion gift at the end of the battle was because it must have heavy limits or side effects, Daigo was shocked to hear this. Light smirked and challenged Daigo to get up and fight. Daigo was in pain but still fought back with rage, calling Light arrogant just for managing to block a death attack. He screamed that his gift had lowered Light's stats and that he could still create new spirits to heal himself. Daigo appeared confused after realizing his stats were not returning to normal. Light activated several SSR cards: Speed Boost, Defense Boost, and Ability Boost, all released at once until the battlefield was enveloped in a massive light of energy. Light then called for Orca, who answered while holding a violin, ready to assist with the Lionheart technique. The magical music echoed around, filling the air with energy that ignited Light's power. Instantly, the stats of Light and his team returned to normal and even higher than before. Light looked at Daigo with a calm expression while showing an appraisal card. He explained that the stat reduction Daigo had imposed had been fully restored and was now significantly higher. Beside him, Nazuna looked pleased at the change. Light gave Daigo one last chance to realize the truth. He said that having two gifts was nothing extraordinary, especially if that power could only be used by sacrificing one's own body. Light then held up a handful of cards and glared sharply at Daigo. In a calm but firm tone, Light stated that his gift was nothing like Daigo's. Because Light's gift was something that went far beyond limits, something called an infinite gift, unlimited. Light stood with a sharp gaze toward Daigo, who was clutching his head and groaning in pain. Inwardly, Light was angry because his original intention had been to capture, not kill. But Daigo had harmed and even killed his comrades, leading Light to assert that all those actions would be repaid and that Daigo would regret them. Daigo, still enduring the pain, immediately released a host of new spirits. The Sword Spirit, Gravity Spirit, Darkness Spirit, Light Spirit, and the strongest one, the Balial Spirit, were all summoned at once to attack Light and his team. Full of rage, Daigo ordered all the spirits to kill without mercy. Nazuna reacted instantly and activated her Prometheus power, altering fate. In a flash, Nazuna's body appeared to multiply, and all of them immediately attacked Daigo's spirits from various directions. The original Nazuna smiled proudly, claiming she could hold them back as long as she could see her opponents, while her clones asserted that Light would surely defeat them all with ease. Light gave a brief command to Nazuna to leave the spirits to her. Nazuna answered with full spirit and immediately dashed forward. Her movements were incredibly fast, and all the spirits Daigo released were attacked from all sides without giving them time to react. At that moment, Daigo screamed in frustration and begged Light to stay away from him. But Light immediately leaped and landed a heavy punch on Daigo's face. The blow was so powerful that it sent Daigo tumbling far back. Without giving him a moment's rest, Light continued the next assault, striking Daigo while he was still suspended in the air. When Daigo fell to the ground and appeared helpless, Light stood over him with a cold gaze. Upon landing, the ground around them shook violently, and thick dust enveloped the area. After that, Light activated several cards at once while focusing entirely on finishing it. Light unleashed a massive combination attack: SSR Plasma Hatching, SSR Star Needle, and SSR Flange Flurried Waltz Bomb, all raining down on Daigo incessantly. The attacks exploded continuously, creating a barrage of projectiles and immense light that devastated the battlefield. After the onslaught ceased, Daigo was still standing amidst the rubble, his body broken, with a terrifying giant spirit looming behind him. Enraged, Daigo glared at the massive energy sphere in front of him and let out a scream of pure hatred before the giant Bijudama exploded, creating total destruction in the surrounding area. The massive explosion took Light by surprise. Amidst the smoke and energy shards, Light noticed a red barrier enveloping the area. The barrier had withstood all the offensive magic from just moments ago. From a distance, Daigo stood surrounded by a spherical red layer. He looked furious, yet strangely calm. Daigo began talking to himself, explaining that the barrier could block 3 spells simultaneously. He admitted to holding back intentionally to avoid dragging the giant tower into the conflict, as he was still considering the possibility of other parties being involved. But now, he decided it was enough. he would no longer hold back. Daigo then declared that he would use the twin swords he had absorbed and make them go berserk through his gift weapon fusion. He knew this action could destroy the swords, but he did it anyway. Hearing this, Light was startled, realizing that Daigo might be planning to self-destruct. With a blazing aura of fire surrounding his body, Daigo screamed that he would slaughter everyone there to satisfy his urges and raise his level. The magical energy around his body intensified, causing the ground to crack and the air to vibrate violently. Daigo then glared at Light and roared that Light, the witch, and the giant tower would all be destroyed. With a tone of utter arrogance, Daigo challenged Light to fight with all his might just to entertain him. Light was slightly taken aback, but his face remained calm in the face of this crazed rampage. Light stared at the giant energy sphere held back by Daigo's red barrier. In his mind, this was no ordinary attack. Daigo was trying to detonate his twin swords, which were going haywire due to a massive surge of mana. If they exploded, the force could destroy the giant tower and the entire city surrounding it. Nazuna, realizing the danger, immediately shouted for everyone to attack before the energy sphere exploded. Numerous clones of Nazuna appeared and simultaneously struck the giant red barrier. They moved swiftly, but attack after attack yielded no significant effect on the shield. In the middle of the assault, Nazuna embraced a wounded comrade while glaring at Daigo with emotion. Daigo instead issued a dismissive challenge, stating that it was impossible for such attacks to stop the explosion of a mythological class weapon. He mocked Nazuna's courage, viewing her as someone acting tough against something beyond her limits. Nazuna flew into a rage upon hearing that and immediately launched a new attack with a scream of fury. One of Nazuna's clones, leaping toward the barrier, let out a short shriek when her attack failed to penetrate the defense. Light, observing from afar, realized that none of Nazuna's attacks were having any effect on Daigo's barrier. Daigo, surrounded by a powerful aura, looked increasingly insane. With an expression of pure hatred, he screamed that Nazuna and Light's anger had only incensed him further. Daigo viewed them as nothing more than weak prey, unworthy of life, then announced that everyone would be used as sacrifices to increase his level. Daigo's magical aura grew larger and more wild. With bulging eyes and a body trembling from the overflowing power, Daigo shouted loudly, calling Light and the others trash, and ordered them to die for the sake of his ambition. His screams echoed throughout the area, signaling that he had completely lost control. Seeing the situation worsening, Light immediately ordered Nazuna to move away from Daigo. Nazuna responded tensely and retreated at once. Aoyuki, standing not far from them, said in a serious tone that since Daigo had played his ace, they had no choice but to retaliate with maximum power. Light finally activated his new power. Aoyuki summoned her extraordinary strength, releasing the first seal with code 9999 and summoning the legendary weapon Shinsu Gungnir. A giant spear, or sword, descended from the sky and slammed into the ground, creating a shockwave of destruction. Light gripped the spear with his right hand, which was in excruciating pain. A powerful aura radiated from his body. He looked toward Daigo, who was still inside the red barrier, and realized he needed even greater power to shatter it. Daigo smirked arrogantly, considering all of Light's efforts to be in vain. Light called for Ellie's assistance. Ellie appeared instantly and asked for her orders. Without hesitation, Light asked Ellie to release the second seal of Shinsu Gungnir. Ellie was shocked, knowing that such an action could damage Light's own body, but Light insisted, explaining that they had no time because Daigo's explosion could kill many people. With a serious gaze, Ellie nodded and began to unlock the second seal. She recited a series of ancient names in a heavy tone, then prayed to a great power to straighten the cycle of life and reveal the sins of their enemies. A powerful aura surged from her body, causing the surrounding air to vibrate intensely. Once the second seal was released, Light launched a massive attack using Shinsao Gungnir. The attack produced a giant ring of energy that exploded with incredible force, leaving a massive crater in the ground and destroying part of the surrounding area. Everyone, including Nazuna, looked on in shock at such power. From the midst of the smoke and debris, Light emerged with glowing red eyes and a tense expression. His body radiated a dense black aura, and the massive spear in his hand now reflected a destructive light. Light prepared to launch a final, full-power strike. The second level of Shinsu Gungnir now focused on one goal: ending Daigo once and for all. Light stood with heavy breaths, explaining the weapon that was now glowing intensely. Shinso Gungnir, a Genesis EX-class weapon, is a spear of immense power, sealed using the souls of Light, Mei, Ellie, and Aoyuki. Every seal release carries a heavy price, but now half of its power had been unleashed. A surging red aura erupted from Shinso Gungnir as Light finished his explanation. With 50% of its power active, the weapon was nearly impossible for him to control. Pain spread throughout his body, making him groan as if half of his being no longer belonged to him. He realized that maintaining this form for too long would cause him to lose consciousness. On the other side, Daigo was filled with a burning rage. He screamed furiously while mocking Light, calling him a fool for relying on that spear. In his mind, Daigo was certain he could not lose. He believed that his suicide attack, sacrificing the Spirit Twin Swords, the strongest mythological class weapons, would destroy everything. With a face full of wounds and deep-seated hatred, Daigo was determined to surpass his limits, to take revenge on the one who had harmed him. A dark, hot aura radiated from his body, and he announced with arrogance that Light and the others would be swallowed by a massive explosion. His goal was simple: to become the strongest by any means necessary. A massive explosion occurred as the two giant powers collided. A golden yellow light enveloped the battlefield, pulverizing everything in its vicinity. Nazuna, standing some distance away, could only watch in a daze at the giant explosion, while debris flew in all directions and the sound of the blast shook the earth. Light gripped Shinso Gungnir tightly and concentrated all his strength. With a loud shout, he launched his ultimate attack, calling out the weapon's name once more. The spear glowed with a blinding reddish-purple light, then fired a massive surge of energy that streaked toward Daigo. The clash between the two powers resulted in total devastation. Daigo was sent flying as black energy erupted from his body, turning him into a wild spirit trying to escape. Daigo looked panicked, struggling hard to contain the uncontrollable energy in his body. But the black light from Light's attack swallowed him completely. The entire area turned into a field of destruction. In the distance, the form of a massive black spirit could be seen hovering over a giant crater, the remains of the collision between two supreme powers. Smoke and fire still loomed high, creating a horrific view of the battle between Shinso Gungnir and the Spirit Twin Swords. From the ruins, Daigo emerged with a severely broken body. Part of his body was frozen like Kiko ice, and his face was filled with despair. He let out a shout of shock, unable to believe that even an attack of that magnitude wasn't enough. Even though he had sacrificed his strongest mythological class weapon, he had still been utterly defeated. The final explosion sent Daigo's body tumbling far back, leaving a massive crater in the middle of the forest. Thick smoke billowed, and the sound of the boom still echoed in the distance. The battlefield was left with nothing but total destruction and a giant hole as proof of their struggle. Light stood tall in the center of the vast crater, holding Shinso Gungnir, which still emitted a wild aura. He reflected briefly on what had just happened, remarking that the so-called strongest mythological weapon was ultimately just a one-sided title. To Light, Shinso Gungnir far surpassed those limits. With a sharp gaze, Light concluded that the Spirit Twin Swords were only strong among other mythological weapons. Meanwhile, before him lay the giant crater resulting from the power of Shinso Gungnir, which had now truly shown the meaning of absolute strength. In the middle of the scene, featuring the massive crater and the giant tower in the distance, Light still stood in the ruins, his body looking exhausted. The effects of the immense power he had released made his body tremble with pain. Before long, Mei, Ellie, and Nazuna ran toward him, looking worried at the sight of Light, who had removed his mask. Mei immediately gave directions for Ellie to provide emergency aid before they sealed Gungnir. Ellie nodded quickly, purifying her threads with magic while assisting Light, who could barely stand. Mei examined Light's right arm, and the results shocked everyone. The level of curse pollution was far worse than before. The black energy of the curse was clearly visible, forming a strange aura around it. Light stood without his armor, staring at his pitch-black right arm. He explained that although his upper body was protected, his right arm was completely contaminated to the point where he could no longer feel anything. The arm was entirely numb. He couldn't even move a single finger, and using magic was impossible in that condition. Light explained that even though he had many high-level SSR Curse Dispel cards, they were not enough to remove the curse entirely. According to his calculations, it might only recover after several years of regular use of SSR cards. But Light refused to wait that long, as he still harbored a grudge and had a major mission yet to finish. With a panicked face, Nazuna asked if it was all her fault. Ellie answered calmly that the curse could be healed, but in the meantime, Light would not be able to use his right arm. Light's decision was deemed correct, as it was the fastest way to keep moving forward. Light apologized for dragging them into such a difficult situation, but he had no other choice. Nazuna looked sad, while Light only gave a weak smile. He told Ellie and Nazuna that he was very grateful, but since his right arm truly could not be moved, he wanted to finish everything quickly, asking them to cut it off in a single strike so it wouldn't drag on. Holding back tears, Nazuna raised her sword, preparing to obey the request. With immense pressure, Nazuna recited the Prometheus incantation and severed Light's contaminated right arm. The arm detached and fell onto the table, while Light suppressed a scream of excruciating pain. Ellie immediately activated Ultimate Leaf to heal him, channeling restorative energy into Light's body, which was still trembling from the shock. Light's screams echoed as his new arm began to grow back, enveloped in an intense aura of energy. The regeneration process felt as if he were being carved open from the inside out, but it eventually concluded. Light sat down, exhausted, while Ellie and Nazuna remained deeply concerned. After a few moments, Light stood up and clenched his new right hand with a satisfied smile. Light thanked them both, saying that thanks to them, his right arm was back to normal. Nazuna, still in tears, asked if there was still any pain, but Light gently patted her head and told her he was fine. Nazuna smiled in relief, while Ellie appeared calm, though she still seemed a bit awkward. Ellie then asked about the severed arm, inquiring if she could keep it for research. Light agreed, as there were still many mysteries behind the curse and Shinso Gungnir. As Ellie examined the arm, she explained that its appraisal text had previously been garbled, showing only Spear of the God. However, after the second seal was released during the fight against Daigo, part of the text appeared, the Spear of the God's Funeral. Light reflected, realizing his weapon was truly mysterious. Ellie added that it was unclear whether the text appeared because the seal was released or because Daigo had been defeated. Everything was still uncertain. Light ordered Ellie to inform him immediately if she discovered anything. Ellie nodded seriously, though she hesitated for a moment, staring at Light for a long time. Light thanked Ellie again for her help, making her blush slightly, though she firmly replied that it was her duty. Once everything settled down, Light donned his armor again and issued new instructions. Accompanied by Ellie and Nazuna, Light prepared to interrogate the captured Miki. From behind the ice door, Miki's casual voice could be heard saying that their conversation was finally about to begin. Inside the frozen room, Miki sat on a chair bound by thorn chains. In a tired but cynical tone, Miki said she had been waiting a long time for this moment. Their meeting was finally, truly beginning. Miki appeared tightly bound to the chair, her body ensnared by sharp thorns from a strategic class magic called Cursed Collar. This device was no joke, as it could simultaneously lower the wearer's level, magic, and physical strength while restricting their gift. Worse yet, the collar could not be removed by the wearer, making Miki's escape from the abyss impossible. Mei reported to Light that their captive could do nothing but chatter. However, most of her talk was inappropriate, consisting entirely of her strange obsession with Suzu. Light responded casually, making Mei blush for speaking so boldly. Light said they still had to listen, as there might be important information hidden behind her rambling. Light then asked Ellie about her mind-reading abilities. Ellie said she hadn't done anything yet, as she was waiting for orders, and then explained the vow engraved on Miki's face. According to Ellie, it was a type of constructive magic that could kill the target if they broke a vow. For example, thou shalt not kill vow placed on someone's body. They all realized that until they knew the contents of the vow, touching Miki recklessly could be catastrophic. Light pointed out that if the vow stated she would die upon being tortured, they could not use force for the interrogation. Ellie confirmed that the magic could neither be cancelled nor read, leading Light to conclude they had no forced way to extract information. Miki suddenly laughed slyly, saying Light was right. She even offered an absurd deal. She wanted her safety guaranteed, full facilities provided, and most ridiculously permission to marry Suzu. Everyone was shocked. Light could only stare blankly, wondering if she was joking, but her expression showed she was serious. Light eventually agreed to the first 2 points, but immediately rejected the last one. Miki complained, claiming she was being cooperative. One team member chimed in, suggesting Light just order Suzu to comply. But Light was firm, stating he would never force anyone into marriage just because of an order. To Light, Suzu and the others were family, not subordinates. Light continued, saying he would not force his family to do anything they didn't want to do, even if it meant losing vital information. Afterward, Light called for Ellie and told her to attempt an information extraction, regardless of whether Miki died. Ellie enthusiastically accepted the order, while a panicked Miki immediately dropped her marriage demand. Negotiations resumed. Miki invited Light to trade information. She said she would provide intel as long as the reward was fair. However, her requests grew absurd. She asked for lewd things involving Suzu. Everyone was instantly shocked, and Suzu was ready to open fire. Light could barely restrain himself, thinking it might be better to eliminate Miki than to keep listening to her nonsense. Light firmly stated he would not grant any request that Suzu disliked. Yet, Miki continued speaking disgustingly about her obsession with Suzu, saying she wanted to merge with her like a slippery creature. Light cut her off in disgust, stating the negotiation was off unless Miki asked for something reasonable. Miki thought for a moment and then asked for something strange but lighter, Suzu's black tights. Light thought this was more reasonable than the previous requests, though still troublesome. After a brief discussion with Suzu, Light finally agreed since Suzu didn't mind. Miki was overjoyed and asked for her eyes to be uncovered so she could witness the process. The situation grew chaotic. Miki screamed hysterically for the tights while laughing, turning the room into an uproar. Suzu looked incredibly embarrassed, while Mei and Ellie could only shake their heads. Some other members even joined in with playful shouts, making the atmosphere even weirder. Light could only resign himself to the chaos he had inadvertently started. Once everyone calmed down, Miki emphasized that one pair of tights could only be traded for one question. Light agreed and began thinking hard about the most important question. After reflecting, Light finally asked, "Who exactly are Miki, Daigo, and Hisomi?" Miki looked annoyed by the question but finally answered. Initially, she only said they were masters, but Light wasn't satisfied as the answer was too vague. After being pressed, Miki finally explained that masters are special souls brought by the great entity Sea Souls who can remember their previous lives. Light and his team were still in shock following Miki's confession. Light immediately concluded that Miki was referring to past lives and souls, so he asked for clarification. Miki, still sitting in her chair, casually explained that a past life is the life they lived before existing in the current world, and a soul is simply their own essence. Miki went on to explain that every master possesses memories of their past life. According to Miki, these masters are divided into two types: those who view Sea as an enemy, and those who respect Sea. Miki and the group cooperating with the demons were among those who respected Sea, while Hisomi and those allied with the Dragon Newts were on the side that opposed Sea. The reason why the masters fought each other was finally revealed. Miki said the fighting was due to differing goals between the groups. Miki herself was tasked with investigating the masters on the Dragonute side and their plans regarding the giant tower. She claimed that, if possible, she wanted to sabotage all their plans so they would fail completely. Miki also explained that respecting C didn't mean fanatical worship, but rather a hope that C would grant their wishes. That was why Miki's group chose to stand on C's side without any strange intentions. From this, Light understood that the masters were beings who remembered their old lives, divided by their views on C. When Light asked why Miki went as far as betraying her side, Miki's expression turned flirtatious. She said that originally, she just wanted to ask for C's blessing to be given a perfect harem. But after meeting Suzu, Miki felt she had found her ideal type, so she decided to defect for Suzu's sake. The reason was absurd, but her face looked sincere. Miki also provided a small leak regarding the enemy master group. She said the faction opposing C was the Dragonutes, and Miki knew they would not be able to win. They had a mysterious plan called PA, but Miki didn't yet know what it meant. She suspected the P might stand for project, but the rest remained a secret. Ellie was curious about the number of masters. Miki replied that there were 11 in total, 5 on the demon side and 6 on the Dragonute side. But since Daigo was dead, only 10 masters remained alive, unless a new one arrived later. That answer made everyone think deeply about what they were facing. Light reflected, noting that the previous question had only opened new mysteries. Now, there were things like C, past lives, Project P, A, and the increasingly strange abilities of the masters. Light realized that all of Miki's answers just added more questions with no clear end in sight. Because of the one question, one reward agreement, Light realized he would have to pay again to continue the interrogation. But he also wanted to be fair, since Miki had answered truthfully. Light asked what Miki wanted in return. Miki thought for a moment and said she didn't want to be lied to or betrayed like before, especially by people who had stabbed her in the back. But as soon as Light was ready to proceed, Miki reverted to her strange habits. She started saying lewd things about Suzu, ranging from the absurd to things that made everyone in the room want to throw a chair. Everyone was instantly repulsed, feeling the interrogation was becoming increasingly absurd. Suzu was on the verge of anger, but Light restrained himself to stay professional. Light actually considered finishing Miki off to avoid further complications, but since he had made a promise, he fulfilled the reward. Light said he would give her Suzu's tights, as agreed. With that, Miki's first interrogation officially ended, and she was locked in the deepest cell of the abyss to prevent any escape, complete with 24-hour guards. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the demon state. In a large room, a massive man with dreadlocks grumbled softly upon receiving a report. The woman in front of him said that both Miki, who was investigating the giant tower, and Daigo, who was leveling up, had disappeared without a trace. The news caused everyone in the room to tense up. A man in a bird mask called Doc immediately panicked upon hearing the news. His shouting made the atmosphere even more heated, but Gira, a man in a black robe with an eye patch, told Doc to be quiet. Doc pushed back, saying he was merely grieving the loss of a valuable comrade. But Gira countered coldly, threatening to shut Doc's mouth if he continued the noise. Their bickering stopped when the large man on the sofa, who turned out to be their leader, said they could continue fighting after the meeting. He stated that the disappearance of Miki and Daigo must be related to the giant tower. According to him, while Miki was weak in combat, Daigo was certainly not to be underestimated, as he possessed a powerful gift called the Twin Spirit Swords. Diara, one of their members, commented that this meant their enemy was incredibly strong. Giara agreed and appeared enthusiastic, saying it seemed a worthy opponent was ahead of them. The leader nodded and suggested that the giant tower might be holding an ace they had hidden until now. Finally, the large man, whose name was Gao, issued orders to everyone to prepare. He told them to remain on standby until further orders, but did not tell them to move immediately. Doc protested because he was busy with research and didn't want to be disturbed, but Gira told him to calm down, as they wouldn't be moving anytime soon. Another member suggested they go rescue Miki and Daigo immediately. Doc grew very excited, calling it a great idea, but his intentions were horrifying. He wanted to use Miki and Daigo's bodies for experiments. According to him, even if they were dead, their bodies could still be useful for the future of humanity. However, Gao rejected the idea, saying it had been too long since Miki and Daigo disappeared, so rushing in would only cause a mess. Gao went on to say they had to delay because the demon state would soon host the meeting of the 9 nations. Everyone understood why they couldn't act recklessly. Gao explained that they had to maintain the demon state's reputation in front of the state guests. Gira mocked the reasoning, calling it ridiculous, but Gao countered that respect was also an important part of power. Finally, everyone agreed, including Doc, who nodded in agreement. The meeting closed as Gao stood up and announced the final decision. He said that after the meeting of the 9 nations concluded, they would move toward the giant tower. Gira and Doc listened calmly, and Gao emphasized that afterward, they would all be free to act as they pleased. With that, the demon state's grand plan officially began. Below the giant tower, a young girl stood in front of a shop with an anxious face. She panicked because Miki's clothes were stained during the evacuation drill, and though Miki had gone to change, she had not yet returned. The villagers, who had previously been enjoying a relaxed lunch, were suddenly thrown into a panic when the ground began to shake violently. They were informed of a high-level monster attack from the ancient forest and were all ordered to take shelter inside the giant tower. After some time, a servant arrived and announced that the issue had been resolved thanks to the Tower Witch. The citizens were finally able to return to their activities. However, some children began searching for Miki, since she had not been seen since the drill. When they asked a fairy servant, the servant replied that they did not know who Miki was. Everyone was confused because Miki had frequently appeared at that shop before. The servant reported to headquarters that upon returning to the shop, all belongings in Miki's room had vanished without a trace. From the bed and desk to the spoons and plates Miki frequently used, everything was gone. It was as if Miki had never existed there. A young girl named Yume, who was close to Miki, grew increasingly uneasy, feeling that the situation was very strange. Yume began to think that Miki had truly been erased from existence. She kept guessing what Miki might have done. Yume was aware that some men had tried to cover their tracks before, but Miki was just an ordinary girl. She was certain Miki would not commit a major crime, let alone attack a fairy servant. In her mind, Yume began to guess that perhaps Miki had been spying on the witch of the giant tower or had some other larger business. But after further thought, Yume realized that continuing to dwell on it only made things more complicated. Eventually, she decided to stop brooding and open Miki's shop so that life could go on. On the other hand, a tense atmosphere filled the meeting room of the giant tower. Ellie stood before Light with her head bowed, apologizing for the negligence that allowed Miki to infiltrate their territory. Ellie asked for punishment to take responsibility. She explained that Miki was a master from the demon faction who had successfully leaked important information to the outside, inciting Daigo's attack. Ellie felt guilty because the tower's security system should have been able to prevent such a thing. Yet, Miki had managed to bypass all appraisal systems and obtain vital information. Light immediately realized that Ellie was blaming herself too heavily. As the leader, Light stated that all responsibility lay with him, not Ellie. However, Ellie remained insistent on being punished. Mei, the ever-calm servant, chimed in, stating that within an organization, rewards and punishments are necessary to keep the system fair. Light was briefly conflicted but eventually yielded because both were insistent. Light agreed to give Ellie a punishment not out of anger, but as a step toward improving their security system. The punishment Light issued was the formation of internal oversight within the giant tower so that no other Miki could infiltrate. Mei praised the decision, calling Light's move very wise. Afterward, Light drew a level 2864 SSR card named Mini Fairy. The card could summon tiny fairies, 10 centimeters tall, that could multiply themselves as much as possible. Light explained that these mini fairies had no offensive capabilities, but served as perfect surveillance tools. Their only weakness was that if discovered, they were easily identified because their forms were clearly not those of animals. Light had been saving the card for secret missions, but he now decided to give it to Ellie to build the surveillance system in the tower. Ellie accepted the card with pride and promised to perform the task to the best of her ability. Light then reminded her that all of this was also thanks to Lilith. Had it not been for Lilith's visit to the giant tower city, they wouldn't have realized Miki was a spy. Light said they must repay the favor by assisting Lilith at the meeting of the 9 nations. However, to participate in that meeting, the Dark Clown Party would first need to rise to A rank. Mei mentioned that the Adventurers Guild had sent notice regarding the rank advancement exam and would provide details soon. Light simply nodded, ready for a new challenge. After the meeting concluded, Ellie thanked Mei for helping persuade Light to punish her. Mei simply smiled and said she would have requested the same if she were in Ellie's position. Nevertheless, Ellie still felt uneasy and said she would repay the favor later. Mei replied that her guilt would not vanish until everything was balanced again. Ellie became annoyed because Mei spoke as if she knew everything and left while grumbling in frustration. Amidst her emotions, Ellie realized that this was her greatest failure. She also began thinking about Lilith again, the woman Light liked, and the person credited with unmasking Miki. But the more she thought about it, Ellie began to suspect that Lilith had known Miki was a spy from the start, and intentionally directed their attention there for a specific purpose. This suspicion caused Ellie to stop underestimating Lilith. Now, she viewed Lilith not just as an ally, but as someone who needed to be watched. Ellie did not yet know if Lilith would be a threat or a blessing for Light, but one thing was certain: she could not be at peace if Lilith remained close to him. A few days later, Mei approached Light with important news. The guild had sent a mission for the A-rank advancement of the Dark Clown Party. It was an escort mission. Light read the document and was immediately shocked to see who they would be escorting: the shrine princess from the Oni Island nation named Yotusha. That name immediately reminded Light of someone from the past. In his mind, he felt this was no coincidence, but fate. The opportunity to settle his grudge had finally arrived. Light stared blankly, yet sharply, and in his heart, only one thing was certain. His next revenge target was Oboro of the Oni. Light and Mei were sitting relaxed while discussing the new quest they had just received from the guild. Light opened the document and began reading the details, while Mei explained that their A-rank promotion quest turned out to be merely escorting the Miko princess from the Oni Island nation home from the Royal Magic Academy. Mei herself remarked that this was somewhat unexpected. A flashback revealed the reason why this quest appeared. After the Witch of the Giant Tower completed the Beastman subjugation mission, an emergency meeting between the 9 nations was held in the Kingdom of 9. Lilith wanted to be crowned Queen of the Human Kingdom, and Light intended to support her. For that, Light planned to accompany Lilith as a bodyguard, disguised as an A-rank adventurer from Dark Clown. Mei explained why this quest was given to them. Given the Dark Clown Party's excellent reputation and the support of various nations, obtaining A rank would actually be easy. However, if they were promoted without a quest, it could cast a bad light on the guild. Therefore, they were given a quest that looked important from the outside, but was actually light work for them to complete. The assigned quest was an escort mission to take the Miko princess back to her country. Light felt this was the easiest possible mission since such escorts were routinely held every year. But when he discovered who the Miko princess was, Light felt the world was very small, as the Miko princess turned out to be an acquaintance of Oboro, the man who was his target for revenge. Mei confirmed Light's suspicion and stated that their relationship had been investigated. For 3 years, Oboro and the Miko princess had been exchanging letters, and there were even rumors of a romantic relationship between them. Mei herself had not expected their connection to lead to this quest. Light grew more curious about how Oboro could know the leader of the Oni Island nation. Mei further explained that Miko Princess Yotusha was known for her high academic marks at the Magic Academy. She was friendly, had many friends, and loved buying gifts for her younger brother during holidays. Her field of study was also focused on sealing techniques. However, on the other hand, Yotusha often appeared emotionally unstable, likely due to homesickness. Light understood that behind her status, Yotusha was just an ordinary girl. Their conversation briefly touched upon Yume, Light's younger sister. Mei commented that Light should not spoil Yume too much so that his sister could grow up independent. Light grinned awkwardly, but remained defensive. Afterward, Light began thinking about the possibility of Oboro appearing during this escort mission. If that happened, they would have to restrain their emotions and stay focused. Light realized this mission could be an opportunity to bring down the Oni Island nation before the meeting of the 9 nations began. Mei agreed, saying they must focus on this mission first to gain the A rank promotion. Only after that could they figure out a way to take revenge on Oboro without losing their way. Light only gave a thin smile while sipping his tea, certain that his grudge against Oboro would not be settled quickly. On the other hand, the scene shifted to Oni Island, Oboro's place of origin. The island was surrounded by sea with a large mountain in the center. There, young children were seen being handed over in fear to a horned man in samurai attire Oboro. The children cried loudly as they were dragged toward the shrine area. Coins were handed over to Oboro as payment. The man thanked Oboro for his contribution in continuing to help them. But the next sight was much darker. Oboro took the children to a large crater filled with murky water and began pushing them in one by one. The terrified screams of the children echoed. Some begged for help, others called out their parents' names. Oboro simply walked away without pity. The children sank into the black water, and on the surface, a massive sea creature with sharp teeth appeared. The monster swallowed them all mercilessly while the water around it churned violently. In the midst of all the chaos, Oboro simply stood on the edge of the cliff, a cold smile on his face. In his mind, all those sacrifices were just small steps toward his goal. Only one sentence echoed in his head: toward absolute power, one step ahead. From this, it was clear that Oboro's ambition was far darker than Light had imagined. A fierce battle took place in an open field. Light was fighting a group of monsters resembling wolves and foxes that attacked relentlessly. Light shouted that he had finished clearing the front and asked about Gold and Nemumu's condition. Gold was merely puzzled as to why the monsters kept attacking despite clearly being defeated. In his opinion, their behavior was strange and made no sense at all. Meanwhile, Nemumu appeared frustrated hearing the monsters' shrill laughter in the heat of battle. Enraged, Nemumu attacked immediately, unleashing poisonous magic to finish them off. Princess Miko's bodyguards, seeing this, were shocked, especially when Nemumu demonstrated a fighting pose while running swiftly toward the pack of monsters. Light immediately took charge of the situation to protect the escort group and Princess Miko. With full focus, Light unleashed a massive magic attack in the form of earth and crystal arrows, calling the attack Rare Earth Arrow. Hundreds of large arrows soared into the air and destroyed all the monsters attacking from various directions, leaving a large crater full of crystal shards. As the guards began to realize the situation, they were startled to see an attack coming from behind as well. They nearly fell due to the vibrations of the explosion. Light, who was already tired, grumbled softly, saying that during this mission, it seemed they would be constantly attacked. Once everything settled down, Light, Gold, and Nemumu checked the surroundings and were certain no monsters remained in the area. After everything was cleared, the Dark Clown team continued their journey with Princess Miko toward the Dwarf Kingdom port. During the trip, Light noted the mission's progress, starting from the initial meeting at the Adventurers Guild and the route they took to the plan to board a ship heading to Oni Island. Light also grumbled softly because he didn't expect to be attacked by monsters on a path that was supposed to be safe. When the atmosphere had calmed down a bit, Princess Miko Yotusha began a conversation with a haughty tone. Yotusha asked if Light's team was indeed the Dark Clown and remarked that they seemed quite unlucky. Light only smirked while wondering who this Miko princess really was, then began explaining an old legend about the origins of the Oni Island nation. A long time ago, Oni Island was terrorized by a powerful creature called the Oni God that devoured Oni humans every day. Eventually, a girl appeared who managed to unite all the Oni to fight and seal the Oni God inside a mountain. The girl was thereafter referred to as the Miko Princess and was worshipped by her people. It was from this that the Oni Island nation was formed. After that, Light also explained that although the Miko Princess is technically the head of state, matters of government and the military are held by the Kamijo clan, while ritualistic affairs are handled by the Shimobashira clan. Thus, the Miko princess's power is merely symbolic. Hearing this, Yotusha casually remarked that her status is simply like that of a puppet, without any authority. Yotusha then mocked the Dark Clown team, saying that although humans are weak, they are somewhat useful. However, she maintained that they would never be able to defeat her personal bodyguards, who are Oni. One of the Oni guards even chimed in with a condescending tone, saying that the result of comparing humans to Oni is obvious. Light felt extremely irritated hearing the dismissive tone of those Oni. In his mind, he complained to himself about how these people loved to look down on humans, despite their own behavior being far from polite. Nemumu also grew emotional and said that if it weren't for Yotusha's status as a client, she would have poisoned all of them. Light immediately stopped Nemumu, telling her that such an action would only cause them to fail in achieving A rank. Nemumu pouted but eventually obeyed. Light then thanked her for getting angry on his behalf. Those words startled Nemumu and made her slightly flustered before she finally whispered that she understood. After that conflict, the group's journey proceeded smoothly until evening. They eventually arrived at the city port to prepare to board the ship to Oni Island the following morning. However, the calm atmosphere did not last long because Yotusha again began to speak aggressively, mocking Light and his team about seasickness and human weakness. Yotusha continued to hurl cynical comments, mentioning that humans would vomit just from a slight tremor of the ship. Light, who was starting to get annoyed, still tried to remain patient. However, Nemumu's face turned red with embarrassment and rage. Yotusha went even further, saying that Nemumu should go vomit far away so as not to be a nuisance. Gold immediately touched Nemumu's shoulder so his friend wouldn't explode on the spot. Light finally spoke seriously, telling Yotusha to stop provoking them as it could interfere with the escort mission. Instead of calming down, Yotusha laughed and said Light was being too serious, while snidely remarking that she only hired them because of the Adventurers Guild's request. Yotusha ended her words with an apology, yet maintained a spoiled attitude and a flirtatious smile. She said she would reflect on her actions while playfully sticking out her tongue. Nemumu almost lost her temper again, but Gold hurriedly told her to restrain herself so the mission wouldn't fall apart. Nemumu eventually apologized, though she was still resentful. On the ship, Light sat noting down his observations. He felt there was something strange about the way Yotusha spoke and behaved. According to previous investigations, Yotusha never showed discrimination toward humans at the academy and even had human friends. But now her attitude was completely different, as if she were intentionally pushing them away. Light began to suspect there was something behind Yotusha's behavior in creating a deliberate distance between them. However, he had not yet found the exact reason. Meanwhile, one of the Oni guards asked about the other adventurers who didn't board the ship. Light gave a brief answer, then looked at Gold and Nemumu before saying they would continue on to Oni Island. The ship began to sail slowly, leaving the port. The sea breeze blew strongly, and the atmosphere was somewhat tense yet calm. Yotusha stood on the deck with a thin smile, saying that this journey would be interesting. Light only glanced at her briefly, knowing that from here on, this escort would not be as simple as it seemed. Light was relaxing inside the ship's cabin, discovering a hammock for the first time. He remarked that the bed looked very comfortable. Gold, standing behind him, replied casually but quipped that if Light tried to sleep in it, it would surely break. Light looked around the cabin, which appeared dilapidated, and thought to himself that their treatment of the Dark Team was truly disrespectful. Nemumu began to grumble, saying she wanted to teach Yotusha and her guards a lesson. Her plan was to poison them all so they would writhe in pain all night. Light immediately prevented her, saying that if she did that, they would be caught. Gold added that if the crew were poisoned, there would be no one to steer the ship. Nemumu grew even more frustrated and said she wanted to poison Yotusha and the men who kept staring at her. Light just smiled and said he understood Nemumu's feelings, but he reminded her again that they were the targets to be protected, not attacked. Nemumu agreed with a sour face, but instead suggested making a hallucinogenic poison, or a stomach poison, that would cause cramps all day. Light wondered just how determined Nemumu was to poison them. Light went back to lying in the hammock while explaining their plan. Essentially, they just needed to stay calm and not cause trouble during the journey. If the ship were attacked by sea monsters, the ship's defenses would handle it. After that, matters of firing, fighting, or escaping would depend on the crew. Light concluded that interfering would only create new problems, so it was better for them to relax until they arrived at Oni Island. The ship had nearly arrived. Light stood up, saying he wanted to go to the restroom before the ship docked. Nemumu enthusiastically offered to accompany him under the guise of protection. Light politely declined, but Nemumu kept insisting. Tired of listening, Light thought to himself that Nemumu seemed to have other intentions, and Nemumu was immediately startled, denying it vehemently. On the deck, Light walked alone and found Yotusha standing at the edge of the ship. The evening wind brushed against her hair, creating a somewhat gloomy atmosphere. Light felt the aura around the Miko princess was heavy and somber, as if it weren't just the sunset creating that melancholy impression. From her gaze, Light could feel that Yotusha looked as if she did not want to go home. As Light continued to observe, the atmosphere became even stranger. In Light's imagination, Yotusha looked like a prisoner being led to the gallows. Just as Light was about to greet her, Yotusha suddenly noticed him and turned around. Her face immediately turned cheerful, and she mocked Light in a flirtatious manner. Light simply replied flatly, saying he just wanted some fresh air before the ship docked, which made Yotusha look utterly disgusted. Yotusha laughed loudly while mocking Light for being too serious. However, the laughter stopped when their eyes met. Light remained serious, and Yotusha suddenly spoke more calmly, saying that Light was young but already dared to take on a major mission to reach A rank, which meant his abilities were truly great. Yotusha admitted she was envious, saying she wished she could live freely like Light and become an adventurer as well. Yotusha looked at Light with a melancholic gaze and said he made her jealous. Light responded in a calm tone, saying that while his life was indeed full of luck, it didn't mean it was easy. Light explained the discrimination humans face from other races, which was sometimes very cruel. Yotusha called discrimination a tragedy, but Light thought that Yotusha did not yet know true suffering. Light then shared his bitter experience, how his old adventurer group, the Gathering of Races, had betrayed and nearly killed him, not to mention his family being executed when his village was destroyed. All of that was enough to mold Light into a cold and cautious person. After speaking at length, Light ended the conversation, telling Yotusha to focus on the escort duty. Before leaving, Yotusha leaned slightly toward Light and said in a soft but pressing tone that on Oni Island, there is a terrifying god who can devour anyone who stays too long. Light only stared back, expressionless, but in his mind, he noted that Yotusha was likely referring to the Oni god from the old legends of Oni Island, which were actually just myths. The ship drew closer to the port, and Light gave the order to prepare for docking. The next panel showed a map and a description of the Oni Island nation, located west of the continent and reachable only after a day's sail. The country was rarely visited because it had no dungeons or historical ruins, so adventurers of other races almost never came. Oni Island lived off trade, gold and copper mines, and unique crafts like silk and porcelain. Light felt the country was very isolated, and its inhabitants preferred to hone their respective skills rather than go out and explore. Only a few people came or went from that place, so the atmosphere was rather closed off. The ship finally docked, and Light was amazed to see the port of Oni Island, which featured a distinct and unique architecture. The group decided to stay overnight at a prepared inn before continuing to the capital tomorrow. Nemumu, still in a bad mood, said she wanted to poison the innkeeper because the place was dilapidated, but Light quickly told her to be quiet to avoid another commotion. The following morning, the overland journey began. Along the way, they could see the countryside landscape, and finally, the capital began to appear in the distance. Gold remarked that the road to the capital was very crowded, Their group entered through a gate specifically for nobles, making Light wonder why they were receiving such treatment. Upon entering, the sight of the capital left everyone stunned. The city was magnificent, standing at the foot of a large mountain with traditional yet sturdy architecture. Light was transfixed by the sight, but his attention was immediately divided when he saw a familiar figure in the crowd. His eyes instantly burned, and in his heart, Light uttered one name with intense emotion: Oboro, the man who had been his target for revenge all this time. A flashback showed a young Light trembling while holding a small dagger. In front of him, a woman lay weak on the ground, and behind her stood Oboro with an angry face. Oboro cruelly mocked the young Light, asking if Light wanted to kill the woman himself or let Oboro do it. That scene was the beginning of the wound Light carried to this day. The scene returned to the present. Light and his team stood face to face with Oboro in the capital square of Oni. Oboro's name immediately surfaced in Light's mind, and his anger almost exploded. But before Light could react, Yotusha greeted Oboro with a joyful face, as if seeing an old friend. Nemumu, standing behind Light, panicked and softly whispered Light's name. Light hurriedly calmed Nemumu and suppressed his own emotions. Inwardly, Light told his team to stay calm and not be reckless. If they were to act now, all their efforts for the A-rank promotion would be in vain. Light took a deep breath, looked down, and focused on not being provoked. Light's previously tense face began to turn calm. Gold, standing beside him, gave a slight nudge, and Light thanked him for helping him regain focus. Light admitted that he could now control his emotions. Gold only replied briefly, saying the important thing was that Light was now calm. Light then turned to Nemumu and reminded her to stop mirroring his emotions. Light said that a true A-rank must remain steadfast, anytime and anywhere. Nemumu, still annoyed, only let out a short growl but didn't cause further trouble. On the other side, Yotusha continued chatting casually with Oboro, as if unaware of the tension behind her. Yotusha asked why Oboro wasn't escorting her this time. Oboro apologized in a polite tone, saying he had an important task that wasn't yet finished and therefore sent someone else to escort her. Yotusha smirked slyly, saying she would forgive Oboro provided that he personally escorted her next time. Oboro immediately promised to ensure that. Yotusha finally accepted the apology with a cunning smile. After that, Oboro turned toward Light and his team with a cold stare. Light returned the gaze without expression, but in his chest, hatred began to rise again. Other Oni guards stood behind Oboro, making the atmosphere even heavier. Oboro handed Light a scroll as a sign of mission completion and said their task was done. He told Light to take the compensation to the Adventurers Guild in the Dwarf City. Gold stepped forward to receive it, holding back his anger while speaking briefly, saying thank you. Oboro then turned around and left with Yotusha and her entourage. Yotusha, having left the area, spoke casually to Oboro about her younger sister, Ayame. Yotusha said she had to hurry home to see her before Ayame fell asleep. Yotusha smirked regretfully because she didn't have time to buy souvenirs and asked if Ayame would be angry. Oboro answered flatly, saying Ayame would surely be happy as long as Yotusha returned safely. Meanwhile, Light and his team were still standing in the middle of the city street. Light looked at the scroll in his hand and said softly that their mission was finished. But his face remained serious. He was clearly still thinking about his past with Oboro. Gold asked about their next step. Light said that since it was starting to get dark, it was better to find a place to stay for the night. He invited his team to walk around the Oni Island capital as well, since it was rare for anyone to be able to visit this place. After saying that, Light briefly recalled Yotusha's words on the ship about the god that devours humans on Oni Island. Meanwhile, Yotusha had arrived at a magnificent Japanese-style castle in the center of the Oni capital. Yotusha walked slowly through the grand hall, looking around with a serious expression. Inwardly, Yotusha thought about her own warning to Light and wondered about the true meaning of the sentence regarding the terrifying god that devours the Oni people. That night, Yotusha sat in a hot spring, reflecting alone. Afterward, Yotusha walked through the long temple corridor with tears streaming down her cheeks, showing the burden and sadness she had been hiding. But upon reaching the castle, the atmosphere immediately changed when Ayame greeted Yotusha joyfully. Ayame immediately approached and jumped into Yotusha's arms, saying she was so happy her sister was home. Yotusha smiled gently and greeted her back, noticing that Ayame was still in her training clothes. Ayame proudly said she had been training hard so she could protect her sister, the Shrine Princess. Yotusha chuckled and said she was glad to see Ayame's spirit, but reminded her to take care of her health because she could catch a cold. Ayame mentioned she had just finished bathing and invited her to bathe together. Yotusha was initially shy and refused, but eventually gave in and agreed. Ayame shouted with joy and promised to scrub her sister's back, while Yotusha promised to wash Ayame's hair. That night, they ate together with cheerful faces. Ayame shared that everyone praised her during practice for being talented with a sword. Ayame also said she wanted to become a great swordsman so she could protect Yotusha from the Oni King if he ever appeared again. Yotusha smiled sincerely and said she believed Ayame would become a great warrior. Ayame was very enthusiastic and said she would keep working hard for Yotusha and everyone else. As the night grew late, Yotusha told Ayame to go to sleep, and the little girl immediately became drowsy. Before sleeping, Ayame asked for permission to sleep together. Yotusha gave a small smile before finally allowing it. Ayame slept soundly in Yotusha's arms. But in the middle of the night, Yotusha woke up and looked at her sister's face. Tears flowed slowly as she murmured quietly that she didn't want all of this to continue. In her dreams, Yotusha remembered Ayame once crying in fear, screaming that she didn't want to die and didn't want to be made a sacrifice. Yotusha woke up again and looked at Ayame, who was still fast asleep. Yotusha made a quiet promise in her heart to protect Ayame no matter what happened. Yotusha was certain everything would work out because someone had promised to help them. That very night, Yotusha walked slowly out of the room while carrying the sleeping Ayame. Yotusha met Oboro in one of the castle rooms. Yotusha said she'd been waiting and asked if everything was ready. Oboro replied with a firm face that all preparations were complete according to Yotusha's request. Yotusha gave a small smile with a mysterious gaze and thanked him, saying that thanks to Oboro's help, she was able to connect with the witch of the giant tower. Oboro bowed respectfully, saying he did not deserve the praise. Under the light of the full moon, Yotusha said it was time to leave the castle that night. She carried the sleeping Ayame in her arms, while Oboro walked behind, following in silence. In her heart, Yotusha announced their goal: to use the power of the Witch of the Giant Tower to achieve a brighter future for the two of them. Light reflected on his team's situation after landing in the Oni Island nation. They had just completed their A-rank promotion quest and decided to stay at an inn before walking around to see the layout of the capital. That night, they had a feast of abundant Oni-style seafood. The atmosphere of the Dark Clown team's dinner was very lively. Gold teased Nemumu about her jumbo portion of rice, telling her to eat as much as possible so she wouldn't look thin. Light joined in the teasing with a laugh, saying that Nemumu seemed to be really enjoying her food. Nemumu became even more spirited and happy to be teased like that. An Oni man working at the inn gave Light some fruit from Oni Island, while mentioning he had heard Light had burned scars on his face. Light accepted it and thanked him politely. Afterward, Gold talked about how incredibly delicious the food was, especially the sea fish and dried fish. Light agreed, saying the Oni must be experts at handling sea fish since their country is surrounded by the ocean. But Light also teased a bit, saying it felt strange that the rice and side dishes were given in such large portions without being asked for. After eating, Light invited his team to head straight for the castle the next morning. The following day, the Dark Clown team walked around the capital. The Oni residents seemed to be watching them, partly because they were curious about humans. Nemumu asked about Light's plan once they arrived there, and Light said he just wanted to walk around the main streets. However, Light also realized that the attention from the people around them wasn't just ordinary curiosity. Several Oni men approached them and asked if they were the Dark Clown party. After Light answered yes, The Oni said they were being summoned to the magistrate's office to be questioned about something. Light agreed to go with a serious face, wanting to know what questions would be asked. They were then led politely to the magistrate's office. There, a horned Oni official greeted them warmly and got straight to the point. He asked what Light's team did after parting ways with Princess Miko's entourage. Light replied that they immediately looked for an inn afterward because it was already night and they didn't go out anywhere. The Oni continued to ask if they had seen Princess Miko again, and Light said no. But from the tone of his voice, Light felt something was off and immediately asked back if something had happened to Princess Miko. The Oni was momentarily startled, then pretended to be relaxed and invited them to rest for a moment before continuing the talk. In a tone like he was talking to himself, the Oni finally said that Princess Miko, Yotsuha, and her sister Ayame had disappeared from the castle. The officials panicked and conducted a massive search, but found no trace at all. All the guards and servants testified that they saw nothing suspicious. Since Dark Clown was the last group seen with Princess Miko, the high-ranking officials immediately ordered their interrogation. Light concluded that they were now suspected as the kidnappers of important figures in the Oni nation. His face immediately turned serious as he thought about the situation. Light continued to think hard, saying that if the palace guards could be so stupid as to blame outsiders without proof, it meant the high-ranking officials of this country were incompetent. The Oni only gave a bitter laugh and said the order came from superiors, and he couldn't refuse because he needed the job for his child, who was the same age as Light. The interrogation continued with a somewhat relaxed atmosphere after that. The Oni's son even asked Nemumu if there were many girls as beautiful as her on the main island. Nemumu immediately became flustered, while Light answered that Nemumu was rare even among humans. Nemumu became restless, her face turning red. The Oni father hurriedly apologized because his son was being impolite, but Light only gave a small laugh and said such things were common even on the main island. The conversation continued regarding human discrimination. Light asked why the Oni people could be this kind, so different from their place of origin. The Oni answered casually, saying that in the Oni Island nation, humans are rarely seen, so there is no discrimination. Most people actually view humans as something new and interesting. It would be a different story if they lived for a long time on the main island. Light nodded in understanding and said thank you for the explanation. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed when there was a commotion from outside the room. Light was startled and asked what was wrong. Not long after, a dignified Oni in formal clothing and a top hat entered the room with heavy steps. His face was sharp and his aura was heavy. The Oni man immediately asked if they were the Dark Clown party. Light answered yes, calmly, but from his appearance, Light felt that this Oni was no ordinary person. Light remembered from rumors that such an appearance was usually only held by Oni from the nobility or high-ranking military. The Oni man introduced himself as Utamaro, the head of the Kamijo clan, who's responsible for political and military affairs under Princess Miko. In a loud voice and an angry tone, Utamaro immediately ordered his subordinates to arrest Light and his team. Utamaro ordered them to torture Light and his team until they confessed the whereabouts of Princess Miko. All the Oni in the room immediately tensed up. Light and the Dark Clown team could only stand on guard, realizing that the situation had changed drastically and they could be made scapegoats for Yotsuha and Ayame's disappearance. Light recognized the man who arrived as Utamaro, the leader of the Kamijo clan, a figure Mei had previously reported with his distinctive appearance. The subordinate Oni man warned Light not to approach because of the danger. Utamaro immediately flew into a rage and demanded that Light reveal the location of Princess Miko and her sister, making the atmosphere tense. Utamaro's subordinate tried to calm his superior, but was scolded instead. Utamaro accused Light and his team of being kidnappers and ordered them to be tortured to save Princess Miko as quickly as possible. Light judged the reaction to be far too excessive for a leader to personally intervene just over the loss of two important people. The subordinate Oni man asked Utamaro to focus on searching for Princess Miko first. Utamaro agreed, but still glared sharply at Light while throwing out a threat that he didn't finish saying. From that, Light began to suspect that Utamaro actually cared more about himself than Princess Miko's safety. Light's suspicion grew stronger when he saw Utamaro holding a fan with an emotional expression. Light thought that the leader was hiding something. Shortly after, Utamaro ordered for Light and his team to be taken to the torture chamber, emphasizing that their bodies would be forced to speak to uncover Princess Miko's location. The Oni subordinate who was ordered appeared hesitant but did not dare to refuse. He only emphasized that the order from his master must be carried out. Utamaro then pointed at Nemumu and stated that he would interrogate the woman himself. The situation worsened, making Light begin to devise a plan to get out of the situation. Light assessed that most Oni didn't actually hate humans that much, but their leader was too fanatical and dangerous. Light did not want to drag ordinary Oni into this problem, especially Nemumu and Gold. Without much thought, Light decided to retreat and immediately led his team to escape from the magistrate's office. Light devised an escape plan quickly. They would break through the wall, head to the yard, and then exit the magistrate's office area. Once they were far enough from the Oni's sight, Light planned to use SSR, presence concealment, so they could not be tracked. The plan was immediately executed without hesitation. In the middle of the escape, Light ran across the roofs while Gold and Nemumu were below facing energy arrows from the Oni guards. Light gave the order for Gold and Nemumu to finish off the magistrates so they could escape. Gold launched a massive attack that created a huge explosion, clearing their path to escape. After getting out of the enemy's range, Light and his team managed to reach the roofs of the Oni houses. Behind them, Utamaro and Sujin stopped their pursuit. Sujin praised Light's ability, calling it quite impressive for a lowly human, but Utamaro shouted for them not to kill the enemies, just to cut off their hands or legs. Sujin then stood tall in his samurai attire, saluting Utamaro and declaring his readiness to handle them. Utamaro proudly explained that Sujin is a genius of Oni Island, the only one to surpass level 1,500. This revelation made the situation even more critical. Sujin challenged the Dark Clown team to surrender and turn themselves in. He warned that they had no chance of victory against him. By surrendering, they could avoid torture. However, Light and his team flatly rejected the offer and prepared for a fierce battle. Light analyzed Sujin's strength, concluding that Oni generally range between levels 500 and 700. At level 1,500, Sujin truly deserved the title of a genius. Nevertheless, Light remained confident that Sujin was no match for them. This confidence made Sujin smile with satisfaction as he prepared to strike. Sujin lowered his sword and took a fighting stance unique to Oni Island. Gold stepped forward, first with his great shield and sword, challenging Sujin's direct attack. The stone cleaver technique was unleashed, creating a heavy impact and sparks in the air. Gold successfully blocked the slash with his shield. The battle grew intense as the two great powers clashed at close range. Gold asserted that they had no reason to be captured and tortured. Sujin countered with a fresh upward strike, reminding them that his master had already promised to torture them all. The fight between the two intensified, with each slash being met by another. Gold continued to hold his ground while Light prepared a massive spell from a distance. With hands radiating lightning energy, Light launched Thunder Arrow, scattering electrical bolts across the area to paralyze the enemy. The lightning strike was broad enough to neutralize the enemy's magic, yet Light ensured the ordinary Oni soldiers remained unharmed. However, Sujin immediately retaliated with his sword technique called Moonlight Feathering Blades, creating sharp blades of light that sliced through the air and completely neutralized Light's magic. Light was shocked to see his Thunder Arrow cancelled. From this, he realized that Sujin's technique was extraordinary. This move was an ancestral ability used by the Oni to oppose and even kill their own leader, the Oni god. Sujin stood calmly with his sword on his shoulder, announcing his style, the Oni Island style. Sujin stood tall before the Dark Clown team, who watched him seriously. Light observed him and began to reflect on the Onijima style, a Kijin sword technique he found unique and remarkable, as it was used exclusively by that race. Light then explained the origin of the technique. The Onijima style was developed by the Kijin, with the grand goal of defeating a god, not just sealing one. From this intent emerged a combat art that was exceptionally sharp and lethal. A flashback showed the grim past of the Kijin race, who sacrificed many of their members before the mountain to weaken the god. In that battle, they also used the power of the Miko princess as the key to a successful sealing. Light continued, stating that if the god were ever to rise again, the Kijin wanted to truly defeat it. Therefore, they created the Onijima style, a sword technique specifically designed to kill enemies far stronger than themselves. After the initial clash ended, Sujin commented on Light's abilities in a surprising tone, stating that Light possessed power exceeding that of his own race. This comment confused Light, as he did not expect Sujin to speak in terms of racial concepts rather than individual power differences. Light's thoughts then shifted to the mysteries of Oni Island. Rumors regarding an illegal human slave trade made Light suspect that something was being hidden. Theoretically, there should be no humans kept as slaves on Oni Island. Light briefly considered asking Ellie to read Sujin's mind, but decided against it, as the risk was too great. Simultaneously, the Oni guards began to grow angry, and the situation became tense. Light realized that even a small mistake could trigger rumors that they had kidnapped high-ranking Oni officials. Sujin grew increasingly spirited and challenged Light to a real fight. The battle began, and Light immediately launched an opening attack using the SSSR Phantom Pain card, which made Sujin scream in agony as the invisible strike paralyzed him. The Phantom Pain card has a dual effect. It lowers the enemy's defense and delivers a paralyzing shock without leaving physical wounds. Light seized the moment, slashing with the Super Air Breath sword technique while spinning rapidly. Light's combination of swordplay and magic created a massive explosion that shook the arena. Sujin was sent flying a great distance, landing outside the combat area. The result left Nemumu both shocked and impressed that victory had come so swiftly. Light responded casually, but inwardly he was quite surprised that his attack could send Sujin flying that far. He suspected it was due to the exceptionally strong natural defense of the Kijin race. After confirming Sujin was down, Light immediately took preventative measures to allow his team to escape. With a serious expression, Light used the massive firewall spell to create a giant wall of flames, obscuring the vision of all nearby Oni. The massive fire spread quickly, causing panic in the Oni capital. Utamaro, the head of the Kamijo clan dressed in white, looked bewildered as no trace of the Dark Clown team remained amidst the thick smoke and flames. Utamaro shouted for his troops to find them, but the subordinate Oni could only panic. Meanwhile, Dark Clown's escape strategy went perfectly. They used Firewall to blur vision and Shadow Self to fly away without leaving a trace. Gold analyzed the plan, noting that if only Firewall had been used, evidence would surely remain. But Light added that by vanishing instantly, the enemy had nothing left to blame. Nemumu appeared irritated with the Oni for causing the chaos, but Light restrained her from acting recklessly. Their reputation was more important than venting emotions in front of the enemy. Despite her annoyance, Nemumu emphasized that she could restrain herself because she understood the gravity of the situation. Light responded calmly while ensuring the team remained focused on the next plan. Light decided to return to headquarters first and wait for assistance from Ellie. There were still several important matters he needed to ask Ellie to continue the investigation of Oni Island. After all that, Light reflected on his battle with Sujin and concluded that Sujin was indeed stronger than most other Kijin. However, there was something strange about this island, something being kept strictly secret. Light had a bad premonition that humans were being used for a specific purpose on Oni Island. Therefore, Light was determined to find the Miko Princess Yotusha to get answers directly from the source. The image of Yotusha's distressed face appeared in his mind. Light began to think that the evil on this island ran deeper than it seemed, perhaps even involving Yotusha and someone working with her. As the sun began to set, Light looked toward the sky with a serious expression. In his heart, a strong determination was planted to uphold justice for all the oppressed on Oni Island. Light's resolve was firm. Whatever happened, all parties involved would pay for their actions, including Oboro and Sujin. The battle on Oni Island was not over, but the direction of his goal was now clear. In the Abyss meeting room, Light sat with his comrades to discuss the incident on Oni Island. Ellie recalled Sujin's comment about Light's power exceeding his race. Light considered that Sujin might have just been speaking carelessly, but still found it strange to hear such a thing from an Oni official. Mei then presented the results of the investigation from the surface. The results were surprising. There was no evidence of human slave trade on Oni Island. In fact, there were no records of slave sales heading toward the island. The team was shocked, as this contradicted Light's previous assumptions. Light tried to calm the atmosphere by saying that perhaps his assumption was merely a personal theory, or stemmed from events that occurred long before their investigation began. Ellie praised Light's analytical skills and added a theory that if the trade had started more than a year ago, it was natural that no evidence was found. Light found this plausible and ordered Mei and Aoyuki to dig deeper on the surface. They were tasked with finding evidence of whether human trafficking on Onijima had ever occurred in the past. Both immediately agreed and prepared to carry out the order as quickly as possible. Next, Light turned to Ellie. The plan was to send Ellie to Onijima as a witch from the Great Tower to secretly read the minds of the Oni officials. This mission was part of Lilith's grand goal for Dark Clown to conquer one more territory before the meeting of the 9 nations. Ellie smiled and accepted the task with confidence. However, Light reminded her of the great risks involved. If Ellie found memories of human torture in the minds of the Oni officials, she had to be ready for the consequences. Ellie responded with a sharp gaze and enthusiastic smile, vowing to make them regret it if it were true. Light reaffirmed his trust in Ellie, while she answered with a confident nod. Mei then asked about the plan for dealing with Oboro. Light explained that they would retaliate for Oboro's actions, but still needed to confirm the Miko princess's involvement in human slavery. Light added that Oboro appeared close to the Miko princess, so there was a possibility of a connection between them. Therefore, the first step was to find the Miko princess. Light drew several cards, including the SSR Clairvoyance card, to assist in the search. The Clairvoyance card was explained to have the ability to show whatever the user desired, but was limited by distance and knowledge of the target. If the target's appearance changed drastically, the card would not work. Light was aware of this weakness from his experience searching for his siblings. Light believed he could find the Miko princess because he still remembered her face clearly and was certain her appearance had not changed much. With the combination of the card and that knowledge, he was confident the search on Onijima would yield quick results. Mei and Aoyuki expressed concern regarding the missing Miko princess and her sister. They feared that if they had truly been kidnapped, the two might have been taken to the main island already. Both felt they had failed to help, but Light comforted them by saying they had already performed an important duty. Light emphasized that only he, Nemumu, and Gold would go into the field, and it was not a major issue. Mei and Aoyuki thanked him and promised not to let him down. Afterward, Light and Gold returned to Oni Island to continue the search. Upon arrival, Light reflected on the fact that the search was much easier than expected. They found the Miko princess Yotusha and her sister Ayame playing in a simple house rather than a castle. From a distance, Gold observed that the place had facilities like bathrooms and a guard room, indicating official oversight. Nemumu noticed that Yotusha and Ayame appeared free and were guarded by Onijima troops, not like kidnapping victims. Light agreed. While thinking about the strange incident at the Kamiju clan head's office earlier, the reaction was far too panicked to be a mere act. Light then concluded that there might be a third party manipulating the situation, especially since Oboro appeared close to the Miko princess. He felt something was being hidden behind their relationship. Nemumu offered to kidnap Yotusha easily without special skills, but Light refused. Light chose to wait for the right moment and approached Yotusha while she was sleeping so as not to disturb her time with her sister. After making that decision, Light instructed the team to return to base and wait for Ellie's guidance from the Great Tower. Light ordered Gold to contact Ellie later, while Nemumu was tasked with preparing the next steps. Nemumu answered enthusiastically, but Gold immediately teased her not to act recklessly. Their banter lightened the serious atmosphere. They shared a laugh before Light activated teleportation to return to base. The final panel showed a view of Oni Island in the distance, marking the end of their temporary journey that night. Night fell. In a quiet traditional house, the Miko princess, Yotusha, and Ayame were fast asleep. Light, Gold, and Nemumu were already in the room where the two slept. They now stood by the bedside, ensuring Light's plan to infiltrate undetected went perfectly.